OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.
7:30 on this Thursday morning. You're very welcome along to our OTB AM. We have a very busy show coming over the next 2 hours or so, and it's the first time in this studio in our temporary digs for Johnny Ward this morning. Morning, Johnny.
Morning, Shane.
How are you finding the lights in here?
It's quite bright. Kind of has like a morning TV show type
does,
vibe about it.
Yeah. I've seen you on different racing podcasts and stuff before. It kind of has that kind of vibe where it just feels a bit different. But we'll get used to it. Yeah,
we will. We're on the 5th floor. We're on a high. And we've lots to talk about, including your move to Dublin. You're not travelling from Mullaney anymore.
No, well, next week and a half. So, for people who are unaware, the morning drive is an early start, 4:45 in the morning I leave.
That's early.
But at least you get to listen to podcasts and stuff as well.
Patrick Kavanagh, the first time he came from Monaghan to Dublin, he walked.
Did he?
Yeah.
Right. Well, so now if you're trying to make me feel bad for driving and polluting the environment.
Yeah. Well, yesterday was interesting on the climate change.
It was.
I was playing Astro in
it took Johnny
thunder and lightning
90 seconds to start talking about climate change.
Well,
that wasn't bad.
Dan McDonald, our erstwhile friend, we played a game of Astro at 1:00 yesterday, and I'd say there was like 10 sheets of lightning throughout the game. It was I've never experienced anything like that before. It was mad when you see the lightning, then you're waiting for the thunder.
Yeah.
Very little thunder in my performance.
Kathleen McNamee is here this morning as well. Morning, Kathleen.
Morning, guys. I was enjoying the chat. I was just sitting quietly in the corner.
It's a morning TV show. It's morning AM.
Like we sit in production meetings, we're like, what are we going to talk about this morning? And then lightning comes up, climate comes up. Basically everything you don't plan for comes up.
A lot of people. It was mental yesterday. Like we were sitting in the office, and I think I was the first person to notice the lightning and stuff. And then just slowly, every person was like, "God, was that lightning?"
It took me a while.
Yeah, you were about half an hour after it actually started.
Like, there's lightning.
It's rare. It's a rare enough thing in Ireland. And then when you're going to bed and you see it out the window, it's like you're in a movie or something. So it was crazy. Playing ball, you're like, is this the end? Are we just going to get struck by lightning here? Because our performance is that bad. Like, it would be probably a good thing for...
Jeez, I had the umbrella. I was getting ready to leave the office yesterday afternoon. It looked like it was Armageddon outside because it was so dark. But then I was like, I shouldn't be holding a steel umbrella up in the sky at this point. But safely got to the car, got home. We've got loads to get through. We've got Premier League matches last night that I know myself and yourself, Johnny, were watching United Spurs. We'll get to that in a moment. But Kathleen... Women's Champions League last night. Lyon 1, Arsenal 5. This, now, all of the previews where you kind of thought, right, this is going to be a walkover for Lyon. Not a walkover, but they're the holders, they were the favourites, they were at home. Group C was kind of set up for Lyon to win, but it didn't exactly pan out that way last night.
No, this result was mental. Like, I fully admit I didn't really tune into the match as it was happening because I was just like, oh, Lyon are going to win. Like, Arsenal, I saw the lineups and Arsenal weren't even playing Miedema, and I was like, what's the point? And then I checked my phone and I saw that it was 4-1, I think, when I first checked it. And I was like, am I seeing things? Because we had work drinks last night and I was kind of like, how many pints did I have?
Yeah.
All safe though, was home by 9:00. But yeah, this result was completely unprecedented. I think like 2006 or something was the last time that they lost by more than like a 1-goal margin. It's been like 2005 since they lost by more than 4. So it's been like totally unprecedented for Lyon to lose by this much, even though there's been this whole conversation the last couple of years of, where do they sit? And it was kind of answered a little bit last year when they won the Champions League and they beat Barca and they did it so convincingly. Losing 5-1 to this Arsenal team was insane. But it was great to see players like Beth Mead, Caitlin Ford, who's incredibly underrated as a player, I think, because she's been on a team with someone like Miedema. We don't think of her as like one of the top strikers in the WSL, but she really is. And even Freedom Adam, like she was on for Miedema. She very under the radar player, not someone that you would pick out in the sort of game that's going to play. Now, it has to be caveated that like Lyon were missing quite a lot of players.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of like City missing a lot of players. Like their B team is as good as their A team. So yeah, a massive win for Arsenal. And they did it away as well. It wasn't even like they were at home. So I think they'll be delighted because like that was a really tough group. I remember when the draw was made, it's like them and Juventus is also there. Joe Montemuro, who used to manage Arsenal, coaches Juventus now. They got quite a few scalps last year in the Champions League. So everyone kind of thought Arsenal might have been on the edge to even get out of the group.
Yeah.
And to start off their campaign with a 5-1 win against Lyon, current holders.
It's not a bad start.
No, you can't ask for much more.
Just reading there, like Arsenal have beaten the holders and Champions League winners in 6 of the last 7 seasons on their own ground in the opening game of the group stage.
That's
which is mad.
Yeah.
So they have a good record. Like, but it's their first win in 6 against Lyon. But I mean, in terms of beating the big teams in the Champions League, they can do it early on. They can do it early on.
It's just whenever they get, like, 'cause I went to see them play Barcelona last year. It was the tie that was at the Emirates, and they lost 4-1, and they were just completely dominated for the entire match. I mean, I actually just gave up like supporting them after a little while and just sat back and enjoyed watching Barcelona, because Barcelona were playing such beautiful football. I was like, if I watch this as a fan, it's just not going to be fun. But if I watch this as someone who likes football, and this has always been Arsenal's. It's not even Arsenal's problem. It's kind of English teams' problem. Like we saw it with Chelsea, we've seen it with City. They struggle in the Champions League so much, especially when it gets to the later stages, and they lose to teams they shouldn't. So while it is great to see them do this now, I don't know what it actually says for the rest of their season in the group, and especially because the fixture schedule this year, especially, like, I know we talk about it so much on the men's side, but this year in particular for the women's side is quite frantic, and we're getting to that stage where it's starting to pile up and they're starting to see more injuries come in. But even, like, we talked about injuries for Lyon, I mean, like, Arsenal were missing their main centre-back pairing.
Yeah.
And everyone thought that was going to be a massive issue for them. They barely beat Reading at the weekend, who are bottom of the WSL, and then come out and beat Lyon 5-1.
Yeah.
It's just a bit... I actually don't know what the reason behind it is. I think Lyon maybe underestimated them slightly and didn't perform, but it's not what you would expect from a team of that quality.
Did you see the crack with Beth Mead the other day? They were at the Ballon d'Or, and Miedema, who you mentioned, by the way, 120 goals in 149 games for Arsenal.
Wow.
For Vivian Miedema, that's unbelievable. But she...
and she's tailed off as well in recent seasons.
Beth Mead was only her guest. That's how good Miedema was.
Yeah.
So the Ballon d'Or, she was pictured. Was it One Magazine picked this up, or was it
I think it was Getty or something.
Right.
They took a picture of the two of them. Beth Mead came second in the whole thing. And, like, they're going out. They are a couple.
Yeah.
And so they went to it together, and it was just like Vivian Miedema and a guess. It was quite funny because Arsenal
Beth
actually...
Mead.
Yeah.
Euros winner Beth Mead.
Yeah. Arsenal kind of like picked up on it in their pre-match stuff last night, and there was like a few photos of them like warming up with it or whatever, and they were like, Vivian Miedema and a guest warm up for their Champions League tie against Lyon.
And there was, of course, Premier League action last night as well, and I know, Johnny, you were watching matters at Old Trafford. Your younger cousin, was it?
My nephew Vinny, it's his first game, his first time on a plane, I think. Obviously hasn't been listened to his uncle, but the plane was badly delayed in Dublin, I think, and
lightning maybe
it was actually.
Maybe
Maybe it was. They were definitely blaming the airline anyway, whatever it was, you know. But so he got there, and you know, he's 10, so it must be such an amazing experience. Like, I think my first big game, I was definitely older than that, and I certainly wasn't going to like Old Trafford, and he's a big Man United fan. They won 2-0, and it sounded like the atmosphere was really good at the game. Yeah. Like, you know there's so many day trippers like my nephew at games in the Premier League. Sometimes you're like, it lacks kind of the vibrancy of the old days, but you could really, I felt from watching TV, there was a really good atmosphere at the game, and Man United fans, I think the players like responded to it in a way, like they, you know, it was a real home advantage thing, and it
kicked them into gear for sure in the second half.
It did, and it was kind of cool to see, and even, you know, the likes of performance from Fred and players like that, you know, maligned players really. Fred was outstanding last night. I think the main takeaway from the game is how poor Spurs were. I couldn't get over it. I mean, I was like, this is going to be, I want to see how Doherty got on. He didn't do badly, but I wanted to see how, like, Spurs were ahead of Man United in the table. Where is this battle for, I don't know, second or third place or top 4 or whatever it is? Conte was, it was like as if he was watching a movie and he was just on the couch having popcorn. Like, why aren't you making changes
quite
there?
Passive, wasn't it?
Like, Son was literally anonymous for the whole game. And I was like, so you go 1-0 down after 50 odd minutes or whatever, which was merited, and he made no changes. He made like a triple or quadruple substitution at 2-0 when the game was up.
Yeah.
And I was just really disappointed in Spurs. They had a lack of ambition at 0-0, fair enough. But at 1-0 they were actually worse. And Conte made no changes, which I just thought was baffling. But Ten Hag, Man United, I was very impressed with them. Like, it's the first time I've seen them in a few weeks, and defensively just really well put together. McTominay came on at the end. Casemiro was kind of the holding player, played really well. Rashford did all bar score, like, but they were way better than Spurs.
Conversation we literally had yesterday morning about Rashford.
Yeah,
he's it's great to see. Like, he's just he's such an inspirational figure. He didn't score, but he played really well.
Yeah. And he's getting into positions that Ronaldo perhaps wouldn't have been getting into, like running behind. What did you make of Ronaldo walking down the tunnel? Like, this was, so for anyone who didn't see the game, probably 88, 89 minutes. Ronaldo, by the way, United still, I think, had the option of a sub or two to make. So it wasn't as if the last sub had been made or he'd come off from the pitch and walk down the tunnel. He just brazen, as you like, walks down the tunnel with a couple of minutes left plus stoppage time. I mean, the optics weren't great, and it's a bit...
It doesn't really surprise me anymore, though. Like, he's done it so many times, and even when he is on the bench, he just looks unhappy and kind of...
shaking the head.
A bit petulant or something. Yeah. And, I mean, you look at the legacy that he has in football, and you kind of wonder from his side what the point of it is. Like, I understand being frustrated with being in United. I'm sure there's a lot of players that are frustrated with having been in that team for the last while, but he obviously knows himself as well that there's not a lot of other teams that want to take him on. So I don't understand why he isn't trying to be more of the team player and put himself out there as being like, look, I understand things aren't going all that well for United, or not going as well as they could be. I'm going to be the team player. I'm going to fulfill my legacy.
Yeah.
And instead, he just seems quite happy to kind of throw the towel in a little bit.
I think it's hard to think like Ronaldo thinks as well, in the sense of the career he's had and his stature in the game and the life that he lives every day, where he probably has built himself up as well.
There's an ego there. Obviously.
There's an ego, and the ego is part of his greatness as well. You can't divorce that from the amazing career that he's had and that self-belief. But, like, I'm talking about our game of Astro, it's when you're hitting 40 and you play as badly as I did yesterday, you're like, God, slowing down is bad, but at least I'm not photographed by a million cameras. Like, and Ronaldo is probably...
Were you shaking your head like a petulant child as well?
I was. I had a horror show in the second half. Right. But I was like, I'm not Ronaldo, and Ronaldo has to deal with this, and he knows that the cameras are on him, and he must recognise that Man United are a far better team without him now. They have a dynamism that they just can't have with his legs, I think.
It's like he took away from the moment of celebration where the full-time whistle celebrations were actually, like, for a United fan, it was lovely because, you saw Varane and Dalot giving it loads, the far end of the pitch, close to where the away fans are in Old Trafford. But, like, Ronaldo not being there for that moment was kind of a bit bizarre, because I'm seeing clips in recent games where Ronaldo, even when he's not starting, is kind of, G'ing up the players before the match at the warm-up, and those look, I know Joe and the lads the other night were talking about maybe lack of professionalism to some degree, but like you see things like that, clips like that, where he does seem professional and a bit of a leader in the team, but then you see the petulance walking off. Maybe there was a reason for it, but I mean, Ten Hag was asked about it afterwards, and he said, I'll deal with that tomorrow, which is today. So
Ten Hag has won the battle now, though. Man United fans were delighted going home last night, and if they see Ronaldo, I think Ten Hag he's not there long. He's doing a marvellous job. You look at them last night; they really know what they're doing.
Yeah,
and the likes of Shaw, is outstanding last night, and again another maligned player, Dalot, really, really solid.
Very good last night.
De Gea had nothing to do. I don't think he'd one save to make. And against Spurs, whatever about Spurs' performance, that team that Man United put out, they would be a threat, like, against pretty much anyone in the league in a 90-minute game. And Ronaldo's just he is yesterday's story, I think, now.
It was even yesterday on the show, like, we were talking about Bruno Fernandes, and
I was actually just about to ask you, how did you feel about how he played?
He was terrible, but then he got a great goal. Like, he was the one player who's like, he's not really at it.
But he was poor for some. For most of the, there was one point where Jim Beglin on the commentary was like, he was very disappointed with himself times, Bruno, but then he came good in the second half, because the goal was great, but he also started to come in.
He started to play. I think his confidence started to rise. It was a goal that sort of presented
to you guys yesterday morning and had that up on the dressing room wall.
Yeah, he had OTB AM literally in the dressing room, as you say. But he, as I was saying yesterday, I think it was maybe 28 goals he scored in his first season, first full season with United, and then it was 1 in 13, I think, 1 in his last 13. So we shouldn't be getting excited about Bruno Fernandes scoring a goal, because that's what he should be doing anyway.
He didn't play very well. It was a moment of great opportunism, but prior to that, what are we talking, like an hour odd, he'd been probably the worst player. Actually, he had been the worst player.
Fairly absent. Fred, by the way, I mean,
outstanding.
I think United fans are starting to really see him as not a cult hero is a strong word, but Yeah, go on. I'll just say it. Cult hero. He is a cult hero. Fred is a cult hero.
It was the position he played in, though, as well. It's just that he played him further up the pitch, using Casemiro as a sort of deeper player.
Yeah.
And Fred was able to.
But even when you saw him, Ericsson wasn't fit. You were like, well, this isn't good. You know,
I feel like fans have such a love-hate relationship with Fred, though, because most of the time that he either does something quite good or else he does something incredibly bad.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's never really that like in-between conversation about him, or there's not even really that conversation about where he should be playing in the team. Like, I feel like a lot of United fans, if they had to get rid of him tomorrow, they would, and they wouldn't miss him either.
He could have a big World Cup. Like, this is the thing. He's starting to come into form, and Casemiro's playing well as well alongside him. I mean, Brazil, John Duggan said the other day, he said Brazil are a banker for the World Cup.
But if you look at, we'll say, Arteta, what Arteta has done in terms of the mentality at Arsenal, like Casemiro, there was a clip of him celebrating, I think, the second goal where he basically went down
on his knees.
Down on his knees.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
People they're definitely buying into Ten Hag here, like, and he's made a radical difference already in that you can see the mentality. Like, they were so on it last night compared to Spurs.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same as Arsenal, where you go through a spell or a lull, or kind of coaches who are just not up to the job anymore. And if I were a Man United fan, I'd be hugely encouraged by last night. The mentality of the players. And if you lose the ball to Man United on a break, that was the mad thing about Spurs. Spurs were playing like on the counter, but they don't actually have that much pace.
Yeah.
Whereas Man United really do. And if Rashford can sort of start scoring goals, I mean,
the small thing that a centre forward needs to start doing.
There for the grace of God, that shot that Lloris saved sort of when it was 2-0. I mean, I don't know how that didn't go in.
Great save.
But if I were Ten Hag, I would be like, I'm delighted with your performance. And his body language compared to last year, where he looked like he'd the world of problems, and now he's just none.
He's a new man. United fans in the
like you when you get to Sony batter. Wait till that happens.
Taking over.
Good luck with your morning shifts then.
Listen, I'll get an extra hour in bed. I'll be delighted with myself, Johnny. Interested to hear what United fans think in the YouTube comments and the Facebook and the Twitter this morning. Spurs fans as well. I mean, you have to be disappointed. Interesting tweet I read from Miguel Delaney last night. He was saying, I've had it put to me that Conte thinks the World Cup will distort the season, so he has tailored the physical programme so Spurs are in top form after it, hence conserving energy now. We won't know the truth until the new year, but Spurs currently looking very still. I'd be surprised if that was like...
It's a risky thing.
Very risky.
Like, so you don't know who's going to get injured at the World Cup. You don't know what squad is going to come back to you. You know, you have no control over really what they're going to be doing.
They haven't a hope of winning the league, right? I think that's fair to say.
That's gone.
So then if he's thinking we want to finish top four and essentially, you know, we've spoken about Stephen Bradley even at the Shamrock Rovers level trying to be pragmatic. Maybe he's thinking, we'll finish top four. On last night's evidence, Man United are a better team than them. But obviously it's over the course of the season.
They don't even really look like a team though as well that are like conserving energy or trying to conserve themselves physically until afterwards. They
just look beat.
Yeah, they just look beat. And
they have a good points tally. Like their tally going like 23 from 10 going into last night or whatever. It's fine. But that was limp.
Yeah.
Barely had a shot on target. Like.
Limp performance. Interested to hear what Spurs fans think this morning on OTB AM, brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Coming up on today's show, we'll have Tony Evans on the way fairly shortly, talking the Panorama doc the other night on Liverpool FC and the mad scenes of the Champions League final where fans couldn't get entry to the stadium and there was scenes of pepper spray and all sorts of carnage at that game. And he'll of course talk about Liverpool's win last night against West Ham. After that then, 10:10 we'll have the Kilmacud Crokes captain Shane Cunningham joining us in studio. So great win in the Dublin Senior Football Championship for Kilmacud last weekend, and they still have the pain of Kilcoo last year to contend with. So loads of interesting things to get into with Shane Cunningham, not least the impact of Shane Walsh at the team as well. We'll do the sports pages at 8:30. Sports news with Cathal Mullaney then at 8:40. You had to be there. Our latest episode with Vinny Perth, the former Dundalk manager, at 8:55 AM. He's got loads of interesting bits, and not just in the world of football as well. But he's been there, done that. Let's just say Vinny Perth. So we'll have him in studio as well for the latest episode of You Had to Be There. And then at 9:30 we'll have Wednesday Night Rugby, some of the best bits from last night's show. Rory O'Connor and Fiona Hayes, and they're reacting to the Irish squad named by Andy Farrell yesterday. Some injuries to contend with there for Andy Farrell, but loads of good stuff in that Wednesday Night Rugby. Some of the comments, lads, coming in. Is there a pause for the people who wanted Conte at United this time last year? Says Richard Redballs. Great name on YouTube, by the way, as well. I don't know. I mean, Conte's still a great manager, but it's just results like last night would make you feel this is Spurs.
Yeah.
you'd wonder.
The lack of changes were baffling. Like it
was the
obvious.
substitution.
I'm sure my nephew even recognised. Like Spurs need changes here. Son was anonymous. Kane had a good first half, not so good second half. Son was absolutely anonymous.
Yeah.
And when Mora came on, he started to run at them, and they looked a bit better. It was almost like they'd kind of given up. It was like they'd lost 2-0 in the first leg, and it was like, whatever, we move on next week. It's like, this is a big game here. Why aren't you doing something?
What did you say your first Premier League match was? Your first trip to...
I think my first Premier League game was like Liverpool Villa, and Peter Crouch scored, which is 2009 maybe something.
I remember, I think my first trip was St Patrick's Day 2001, went over to see Man United against Leicester City. 2 late goals for United, 1-2-0, but Damien Delaney, 19 years old, middle of the park for Leicester. It was his Premier League debut at Old Trafford, up against Scholes and Giggs and these lads. So, I mean, what a welcome. Peter Taylor, I met Peter Taylor after the match, the Leicester manager, and Dean Sturridge and these lads. I remember getting an autograph off Dwight York and Teddy Sheringham before the game and thinking...
Some pretty impressive first game, I have to say.
Can't get any better than this, I thought. But,
that kind of like set you on the road of these like trips to exotic kind of events, like, you know, darts and kind of snooker.
Yeah. It led me down the path. Do you remember your first trip to match in England?
So I actually never went over to England. So the first time I went to actually see a game was last year, Arsenal-Liverpool in the Conti Cup.
Yes.
Was my first like men's match that I ever went to. Like at home, we were a big kind of rugby and GA family. Never, like my dad's an Everton supporter, so we would talk about like Premier League and stuff, but it wasn't probably the main sport. We would always be going to like Ulster finals and that sort of crap rather than, because they're all
you're from Sligo, yeah?
I'm from Sligo, but all my family are from down. So.
Up down.
And in terms of GA, Sligo were never necessarily the best in the world. So whenever it came around to that time of year and Down were making it to Ulster finals and actually had half a chance, the Down jerseys were coming out.
Well, forget your first trip to the Premier League. You'll never forget your first trip to Clonus. That's the be honest.
Anyways, the funny thing for me was I was a massive Liverpool fan, and then I think Galway United won the League Cup, and I got in my head, like, go to a game. Went to a game in Terryland. It was like a night similar to last night without thunder and lightning. 350 people maybe at the game on a Saturday night, 1-1-0, and I was absolutely hooked. And I was like, if I were that hooked and I was like 14, what was my nephew feeling like at Old Trafford last night? Like they won 2-0. They were really good. It was loud, and all that experience getting on a plane for the first time. Maybe we should get him on the show.
We should. See what his experience was.
We should be calling him in right now.
Like live from
the airport.
Exactly. Colin Buhig brought my attention to this audio from last night.
I love this.
So this was great. Amazon Prime last night. Really rare occasion where you see two Premier League managers essentially interview each other. The presenter kind of set it up nicely and put them on the spot for sure. But Thomas Frank, the Brentford manager, and Graham Potter, the Chelsea manager, before their 0-0 draw last night. A very interesting 90 seconds or so exchange. So have a listen.
I think Graham has showed his qualities hugely, and I know that he'll do a good job at Chelsea. But if you ask him one question,
go on.
Why are you changing the formation so many times?
Good question. Well, changing the formation is, we don't really see the formation as the end goal. We see that actually how the team's playing. The team needs to look consistent regardless of the formation. And then it's about the personnel, about how you want to attack the opponent, how you want to defend against the opponent. I suppose those are things we consider. But hopefully there's things that look the same even though the shape changes.
Graham, uncharted territory. Uncharted territory. You have the right to reply. What would your question be?
Okay, I have to be a serious one, don't I? Because you asked me a serious one.
It doesn't have to be.
The biggest difference from the Championship to the Premier League?
The pace of the game, I would say. The quality of the players is crazy. You can make one minor mistake, and it's not getting punished every time. We know that, but you just get punished so much more. So I would say the speed of the game and also here, I think another thing is that I think the level of how can you say. It's more the modern game playing in the Premier League. So many changes, formation shift in the game. A lot of teams are doing that more and more. So, big challenge.
A frank exchange of views.
Oh,
you having that?
Johnny, brilliant.
Hey,
you were ready with that.
Yeah.
That's
You were so ready. I was
Morning AM.
He was like this for 90 seconds when I can't wait to say this. It's going to be so funny.
It actually wasn't. It wasn't a frank exchange in that, like, it's obviously slightly contrived because, but and there is an element of being put on the spot, but it was cool, wasn't it?
That was enjoyable.
You're
You
like,
never
why
get
do you
to see
change
that.
your formation so much? Like, well, sorry, why should I be telling
It was
you?
like a dig for a second from
Yeah.
Thomas Frank. He's like, why do you change your formation? But Potter had a great answer. He was like, I'd like to think other areas of the pitch don't change too
kind
often.
of like the conversation you guys were having the other morning though about coaches and like them being in WhatsApp groups together and talking and like I kind of said I think pre-show that I didn't expect like managers from the same sport to be in the same group and like talking about these sort of
100%.
things, but it's kind of the same thing that we were enjoying
Yeah,
with watching.
that was the Eddie Jones story the other morning
Yeah.
in a WhatsApp group with Mikel Arteta and the Green Bay Packers head coach, I think, and a few others as well. But that sort of exchange, you need to see more of that on TV.
I'd definitely like Richard Cooper to do a sketch of it as well for like, you know, Richard's rugger thing coming down the line.
Yeah.
But it is like, and you're talking about formations, well, like, are Ireland right to play three at the back? Like, should Stephen Kenny was never a three at the back guy, and now we kind of accept it as normal. And even like, I was at a game Friday night where Pats lost a player and they put a 16-year-old centre back. They changed from a three at the back to a four at the back, and these are things that coaches must be absolutely like fascinated by because it's such a fundamental change, and he makes changes obviously all the time.
Yeah.
And some people are wedded to the doctrine. But it's like, how am I going to win this game, and do I have the players capable of doing it? So,
but it's funny if when you're trying to get like little tactical nuances like that, you could tell Thomas Frank actually genuinely wanted to ask him a question that's been kind of on his head, whereas Potter
he was like a fan almost.
Yeah. Whereas Potter was like, I have to come up with a question.
Yeah.
His question was good as well, but that's the type of thing I think we need to see a little bit more often. We don't even see that in intercounty Gaelic games. You don't see two managers on the pitch.
No, generally when you see two managers on the pitch, they're doing something else other than chatting to each other.
100%. But yeah, that was great to see. I mean, the more of that we can see, the better. A couple of comments coming in on the YouTube as well. Bob Dwyer, our resident OTB AM Spurs fan, aside from John Duggan, of course. Spurs were shocking. United were great. Simple as that. Really disappointing. We'll still finish top three. On the evidence of Brentford versus United, Brentford are a better team. A season is over 38 games. Bob, you saying Brentford are better than United?
It's a strong claim.
We had Judd Trump yesterday with the salty kind of reaction to losing to Aaron Hill at the Northern Irish Snooker Open up in Belfast. I'm not going to call Bob salty, but I'm not going to not call you salty, Bob. I'm just waiting for my moment.
Salty Bob sounds like a pirate or
Salty
something.
Bob, yeah.
I was waiting for it. Pat Dorgan thought Fred was good last night, but can be dreadful. I think Casemiro beside him brings the best out of him. Tries every game, to be fair. And Damien says starting to see good pairings. Fred with Casemiro, Ericsson with McTominay. Like, I know football is fairly reactive, but we don't want to get United fans won't want to get too carried away because they know how quickly it can.
They definitely will, though.
Yeah, 100%
Let's
get carried
be
away.
realistic. Like, United fans are probably the ones who get the most carried away whenever their teams are doing well or when they're doing badly. Like, you compare the conversation we're having this morning to the conversation we've been having for the last couple of days. You know, it was a good win for United last night. They played well.
Yeah.
There's still a lot to prove there. I mean, if people are still questioning Arsenal at this stage of the season, considering the fact they're top of the table in some of the games they've played,
Yes.
but it's like United have had one good match and everyone's like,
When you're in the
on
game
track.
as long as Shane and I, just coupling us there in terms of the fact that obviously I'm a lot older than you, you do realise like
Johnny.
we come in to talk about that was a bad performance, then you come in the next week and Man United during Solskjaer's era was like that was a better performance.
Yo.
The next week's like that was a bad performance. You're like, what am I doing with my life here? But Man United were good last night. They won 2-0 and they have squad options. The two players you mentioned not playing, and the roster is absolutely ridiculous. The amount of games these players have to play and they're expected to perform, and maybe they do have a little bit of squad depth as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism around Old Trafford now. Like you could sense it even through the TV. You could sense the atmosphere in Old Trafford. Even Anthony as well. What he's brought a little bit of something like he's
Excellent first half.
I mean, he's some dribbler of the ball. And the balance that Casemiro brings to that team as well, I think is another.
Even Keane Tracy was saying it yesterday about at the weekend. You
Yeah,
know, it was
Newcastle.
a bad game, but he was like, the atmosphere was class.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
everyone was fully invested in the team. And I think you were saying earlier about would United fans go back and take Conte now? And I think like what Conte does is he kind of goes into a team, he burns brightly and then fades very quickly. Whereas Ten Hag is much more of a build a slower build, and you might not see the results necessarily straight away. Like, I don't think this is going to be a straight line for United from now. I think they're going to go up and down a bit until he properly,
it's a tough league,
embeds his mentality and gets those players to where they should be playing. Like, say someone like Rashford, we keep saying he gets himself into great positions. He should have scored. When he actually starts scoring, and when Ten Hag gets him to that place, then I think United are really going to be on a run of form.
Yeah.
What if he actually does realise his potential this season?
Yeah.
You know, I think it was body language really struck me.
Was.
Body language of the players is so positive.
Hugging each other and like it's completely the polar opposite of, say, under Rangnick. It was kind of all this dreary, negative stuff. Bob Dwyer has by the way,
Salty Bob.
he's come back in.
Salty Bob.
United are obviously a better team than Brentford. My point is more about one win doesn't make Man United a better team than Spurs.
Yeah, fair enough.
Probably a fair point. It was only a 90-minute game, to be fair. I just wanted to mention as well that Martin Keown quoted in some of the papers, the Times, talking Arsenal, of course, playing PSV Eindhoven in the Europa League tonight at 6 o'clock at the Emirates. But needless to say, Ruud van Nistelrooy, being PSV manager, has brought the Keown-Ruud relationship back into the focus. Keown quoted as saying, "I could never trust Ruud. I didn't feel like I could trust him going into that game at Old Trafford in September 2003. He would collapse at the slightest touch in the box. When we faced United in the FA Cup semi-final in April 2004, I had moved on. I approached Van Nistelrooy to shake his hand. He looked hesitant at first. I stuck my hand out and told him, don't take it personally. I don't know if he did or still does. They're not on each other's Christmas card lists, I'd imagine.
Get him on the show. Big Ruud.
We should.
Yeah.
Oh, Big Ruud would be great.
Colin Bowie can do it. He can pull it out.
Booster extraordinaire. Let's get on to Ruud van Nistelrooy. Ruud was he's one of those players that I had on the back of my jersey growing up. By the way, an expensive man to get in the back of your jersey.
Yeah, it was by letter.
That's a lot of letters.
It was by the letter. So it was
You just needed to go for the Ruud and nothing else.
You'd have done. It was small v dot Nistelrooy 10, and you're like, oh, this is going to be expensive. But you're just one of those poachers, absolute poachers. United could do with someone like that now, who can score.
Do they not have a poacher on the team already who isn't very happy about playing?
You know the way, like,
petulant poacher.
Kids are now like playing soccer or playing sport at like while they're nappies pretty much, and they're like kicking the ball. So my mate's son, he showed me a photo of him like looking at this guy he's a big Liverpool fan. And the other guy was wearing like a Man United jersey at the little training session. He goes, "You think it can't get worse, but it does." And he turned around, and on the back of his jersey was "Dad won." With the Man United jersey. It's a nice little bit of rivalry there.
Yeah, I saw a video recently on Twitter where there was United fans. A few mates got their mate a United jersey, and he's all delighted. And he's like, "This is a new United jersey." Buzzing, turns around, it's Maguire 5. And you could just see his head drop.
It was like a tradition in ESPN.
old,
whenever you leave, you get a jersey, and like a jersey that you want, but with something you don't want on the back. So the running joke was I would always get an England jersey whenever I left.
Oh God! So we had this argument where Nathan famously or infamously talking about the fact that he bought or would buy his kid an England jersey. I think was before the Euros last year. Which caused controversy. He was asked on to different shows on News Talk off the back of this, where he said,
like Liveline and stuff picked it up. It was like mental. Because I was over in London at the time, and I thought it was an interesting conversation.
Real in the ears stuff. Would you buy your kid an England jersey if they want? Because if your kid comes to you at 8 years of age or 10 years of age and says before the Euros last year, before the World Cup, "Oh, I really love, like, Sancho's my best player or my favourite player or Bellingham's my favourite player," or whoever. Like
800 years of oppression.
Well, this is it. Do you start sitting the kid down and telling him about 800 years of oppression, or do you say, "Oh, just buy the kid a jersey, be grand"? I know which I'd pick. Probably not the one Nathan picked. I wouldn't be buying my kid an England jersey, but I mean, each to their own, I guess. Yeah. And if it makes the kid happy, then
we'll report back when you're a father.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where the kid is desperately looking.
Marriage yesterday, fatherhood today, Shane. You're going through all the stages.
Tell you what, it was Tinder the other day as well. It was like, Jesus, where are we heading with these conversations? We should mention as well, Johnny. I know you're a mammal, a middle-aged man in lycra. That's unfair. Sorry, you don't own lycra. No,
I like
what you did
there.
No, of course.
Obviously, the implication
being
40 and
you are middle-aged.
Maybe that's pretty much middle-aged.
You're not a middle-aged man, of course, Johnny. But the big news that came in yesterday in the cycling world was that the Tour de France looks like it's coming back to Ireland. So officials in departments in the North and the Republic working together to investigate the potential to host the Tour in either 2026 or 2027. So the Republic last hosted Le Grand Départ in 1998. Northern Ireland, of course, hosted a stage of the Giro d'Italia, as we did ourselves in the Republic in 2014. The last time it was the Tour de France in Ireland, I was talking about this morning. Willie Vogt was caught smuggling drugs into Ireland for the event. The race descended into chaos. Jim McDade, one of the politicians at the time, said Ireland would never have anything to do with the Tour de France ever again. But this, it's exciting news, Johnny, for the cycling world.
It is, and we have, as Dodge said on Twitter, if you follow Dodge, he's like, the great reason essentially that we can host a Tour de France is that we don't need to build anything, we don't need to do anything, it's just roads. Right, so we actually have the infrastructure, because our infrastructure in this country is a joke. Like, I think we've so much wealth in this country, it takes years to get anything done, and our stadia at League of Ireland level, I would argue our stadia at GA level are still, they're antiquated, like it's rubbish, like, and the League of Ireland is terrible. But anyway, because the Tour de France is on essentially roads, which many of which were paid for by the EU, this can happen. But that would be amazing. I think there was a big, interest in cycling upsurge during lockdown. That's how I got into it. But in terms of the quality of our cyclists, we have Archie Ryan coming up, who's going to be exceptionally good. I think we've obviously had Sam Bennett winning the green jersey at Le Tour. We've some very good cyclists, and this would be an amazing event. And as Simon in my Velo WhatsApp group said yesterday, because of climate change, they might have to do the whole bloody thing in Ireland. It was the Tour de France this year.
Right, Velo WhatsApp group.
Yeah, like a Velo Club Turn your WhatsApp.
Sorry, of course.
But that's one of the cycling WhatsApp groups I'm in. It was so hot at the Tour de France this year, like 40 degrees. Like that's like beyond. Like that's basically like human rights abuse to be cycling in that weather and climbing hills. Maybe Ireland definitely has that going for it. Yeah. But it'll be amazing for cycling in this country if it happens.
Especially in Lycra, not easy. 6 minutes past 8 on OTB AM this morning. Time to say a very good morning to football journalist Tony Evans, who's joining the show now. Morning, Tony.
Morning, how are you today?
Keeping well, Tony, keeping well. And look, we'll get to the Panorama documentary with you shortly, but I just want to touch on Liverpool last night, of course, and they got the win. They got the 3 points. Darwin Núñez on the score sheet. Is all good in Núñez land now after the goal last night?
Yeah, I was impressed by Núñez. I think he's been getting better with every game. His decision making was poor beforehand, but he was superb last night. And the thing is, both Henderson and Thiago seemed to be finding the range and getting the ball behind the defence so he could run behind them. So I thought there was loads of really encouraging signs last night, even though they made heavy work of it a bit.
Yeah, like it is a big 3 points, and Klopp probably needed it after the weekend. But just to carry on the momentum, I guess, from the Man City win. But Joe Gomez as well, another player, Tony, that kind of popped up in discussion after the City game. He was almost gone earlier in the season. People were saying the Napoli performance was a sign that he was on the downward spiral. But he's starting to come good, Joe Gomez, and that Gomez-Van Dijk partnership could be something that could help Liverpool this season.
Yeah, I think he needs to build his confidence a bit. I mean, it was a very rash challenge that gave away the penalty. But overall, he's very good positionally. He's good in the air and he's quick. So I think he's still 25. There's plenty of growth left in him. So yeah, I mean, Konate looks as if he's got even more ability in that position. But for the time being, Gomez, I think, is the go-to player at centre half. I wouldn't like to see too much of him at fullback because he does get exposed. But yeah, I mean, they're still in a better position than they were a couple of years ago when they had no fullbacks. Sorry, centre halves.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the fullbacks, I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Look, he was okay last night, but caught out a couple of times defensively, and that's hardly a surprise this season given the narrative that's been there around Trent. But Is that an issue? Is that an issue that we're going to eventually stop talking about? But I guess when the England squads are up for discussion, Trent's defensive capabilities are also going to be up for discussion.
Well, look, he's never going to be Southgate's sort of player. It's a risk-reward situation, and he gives you more reward than actually the negatives. So Klopp loves that about him, whereas Southgate is very much Southgate's more timid in that sense, and that's why England won't win the World Cup. Because he doesn't release the pace, he doesn't release the young players who can damage the opposition. The thing about Trent, you've got to account for him if you're the opposite manager. You've got to double up on him. You've got to make sure you stop him, get him forward. And if you've got 3 players in your team that the opposition manager has to worry about, then you should be winning. Southgate's got got 3 players. He doesn't use them like that. He'd rather be more negative. He'd rather play in a more structured manner where, so Alexander-Arnold is never going to be that sort of player. So, and let's face it, does anyone who supports Liverpool care about England?
I was going to ask you that actually, because like if Trent were like a pivotal part of this team, it might change that kind of strange dynamic where I was wondering if you go into a bar like in Liverpool during the World Cup and England are playing and he's not even playing Trent now, what's the attitude like?
Well, there'll always be England fans. It's like, as you know, there's the banners there on the cup, we're not English for Scouse. Loads of us feel that way, and loads of us sort of take a guilty pleasure in seeing England beaten. And, it's, well, naturally, there's nothing guilty about it. We don't like them. It's one of them. So if he doesn't play, but there'll still be people in England shirts, to the city's shame. And there'll still be crosses of St. George flying around. But I think it'll alienate people even more from the England team.
Can I just mention, Tony, before we get to the panorama doc, I guess the criticism levelled at Jurgen Klopp from Manchester City quarters after the comments that he had before the City game at the weekend around, I guess, City's spending power and Newcastle's spending power to that degree as well. Xenophobic, I think, was one of the words used, since that game at the weekend. Pretty remarkable that Klopp's having to come out and defend himself like this. But what was your take on the whole thing?
Well, I got a text from a journalist who was involved, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The moral vacuum that exists at the heart of Manchester City is staggering for them to come out with that. After
Just having a little bit of trouble with Tony on the line. But
if he were to leave on that note, like, he's so right. Moral vacuum. And you might point out that perhaps Klopp was using this platform prior to a massive game for Liverpool to kind of, stoke the flames a bit. But he's right.
Yeah, and like listening to Philippe Auclair last night on the show, like he was talking about Eddie Howe and like, I mean,
how can you divorce yourself from this?
You can't. This is the thing. But the fact that even had Eddie Howe jumping in on Klopp running down the touchline and I guess the treatment, which you're not going to condone, Klopp running after an official in any way, but the fact that Eddie Howe can come out and use his moral compass to talk about it and to critique it in any way, given that he kind of completely just didn't answer questions about the Saudi regime taking over.
Eddie Howe knows in his heart and soul, because he's a good man. He knows in his heart and soul.
He's educated. This is
wrong.
Yeah, he's spoken before about when he was a player reading newspapers on the way to matches, and he's built up this image of himself as a well-read, well-versed character. Excuse me. But I mean, when you're not answering questions about the Newcastle or about the Saudi regime, and then you come out months later and start talking about morality in terms of Klopp running after officials and the bad example that sets, and think, what about the kids kind of vibe? That's just not great.
It extends to Newcastle fans as well. I'm sorry, but I mean, you're buying your club's upsurge in fortunes is based on a horrible oil state, basically, that has done a lot of bad things, and you are associated with that. And granted, Go United were almost taken over by Saudi Arabian consortium, and there, but for the grace of God, go I. But I mean, let's be honest. You know what this is?
Yeah,
it's sports washing.
What's your take on watching the World Cup? Look, we can talk till the cows come home about people's individual choices, but I mean, it's one of those things where you almost feel like once the World Cup starts, the sports washing element of it is going to disappear to a certain degree. We're not going to forget about the human rights issues or LGBT or women's rights, but I mean, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth when you're watching games. But inevitably, and I'll be one of those people probably, where the football starts and it goes to the back of your head as opposed to the forefront of your head.
Like it does to an extent. Like you can engage in whataboutery here all day. Like no state is perfect, and like in terms of the Middle East is full of basket case dictatorships. Effectively, a lot of oil wealth screwing up. The world in many ways. Poor countries like Yemen, that's basically in the middle of it. Qatar is extremely wealthy, and on the index of sort of axis of evil, it would be kind of down there. It's not the worst regime in the world. So the fact that Qatar got the World Cup is bad, but it's more so the fact that what is the point of this? Like there's no legacy of having a World Cup in Qatar. It's a small country full of expats. These stadia, some of them are literally going to be, I think, like picked up again and dismantled after it. So there's no legs here. If you want to have a World Cup in the Middle East, which would be an amazing thing in a country that is football mad, have it somewhere else, like, but not Qatar. And then you bring in obviously the abuses you mentioned and the horrific loss of people who are working in awful heat. Like, you've no idea. Like, we were given out in 25 degrees last year. These are people working in 50-degree heat whose passports are probably taken off them. And, you know, the FIFA don't care about that. They just don't care. And then when you add in the element of the ridiculous World Cup in the winter, which, you know, entails all this difference to the fixture list and asking players to do stuff that they shouldn't do. It was the one World Cup that I really didn't want Ireland to qualify, or certainly didn't give a damn if they didn't. It's just wrong on so many levels, and I won't be able to enjoy it that much. Genuinely, I won't. And there are a lot of games I just won't watch because it's like this is sanitised, and I should be better than this.
Yeah, 100%. Look, Tony's line obviously wasn't playing ball there, but we will get Tony on another day as well to talk about that BBC.
He was great as well. I just find that whole Liverpool-England attitude so fascinating. I mean, when you have Rangers fans singing the Queen in Anfield and Liverpool fans are booing the hell out of them, it's like...
But it's fascinating when Tony says that, like, going into pubs during the World Cup, and you'd almost expect Liverpool fans to be getting a strange sense of joy out of England losing games, which is mad. Like,
it is, because...
Like, understandable, like to a degree, but also mad, like hard to believe nearly.
Like, we have that in Northern Ireland, obviously, but that's like far more complex. And it does fascinate me. But the Trent debate, I can see where Southgate is coming from. He's not a great defender, Tony's point is like, well, England can't win the World Cup because he's too conservative. Maybe he's right.
Yeah, a couple of the comments on Trent as well. Fergus Keogh on YouTube. There was another Trent moment last night in the second half when a cross came over and he was in the middle of the box ball watching. Fortunately, the West Ham attacker mishit the shot straight to Alisson. P. Well says Trent can't defend. He is a weak defender who the opposition target. That's a fact.
Well, I said I made an absolute show of myself on Saturday where I essentially predicted Man City.
Well, you did want to say this.
Would win 3 or 4. I think I said 4-1, right?
Yeah, you did.
I was put my money where my mouth is, to be fair.
Yeah, you didn't sit in the fence, Johnny.
Didn't sit in the fence. That was grand. And I was like, if Liverpool lose this game, which I expect them to, they'll be 17 points behind Arsenal, right?
Yeah.
They're now 7 points behind Man City in a title race that was basically done.
Football comes at you fast, Johnny.
It comes at you fast. So like the Rangers' first half, they were very poor, but I do think it actually gave them a lift in confidence, and they rode their luck a bit last night. But now they're kind of, things are looking okay. Nunez is scoring goals. It's mad. That's why we get paid, to come in and say that was a good game, and then next week, they didn't play well last night. There's a crisis. Like,
yeah.
You know.
It's funny how quickly it all happens. 16 minutes past 8 on this Thursday morning. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. After the break, Kilmacud Crokes captain Shane Cunningham will join us in studio. Excuse me. First, here's the lads on the football show last night talking about Darwin Núñez last night.
If he's seen Salah and he's decided not to pass to him there, that's bad. But if he hasn't seen him, that's worse.
Okay.
And he does seem to charge with his head down a little bit.
Yeah.
But in fairness, he got substituted in that game in the second half, and I did see a stat coming off that he has a goal or an assist every 96 minutes, and that's more or less won a game. So that's decent impact. But Liverpool's problem is that to play him up front, Salah has been relocated to wide on the right. He played through the centre against City. He started wide on the right tonight, and again wasn't really involved in the first half. And I haven't seen the second half since I came in here, but that's an issue. Like, if they are going to give Darwin Núñez some time to find his feet, which is probably right.
Yes.
You know, they're doing it in a very fast moving environment, in the sense that the teams are, certainly the Arsenal and City, are disappearing over the horizon, and if they're going to have to relocate Salah and blunt him a little bit as well,
yes,
it's a pretty high price to pay for it.
Yes, almost anything at the expense of Salah just now doesn't feel like a great option.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that the big thing dictating his relatively poor form in front of goal this season was his position. Like, he was brilliant at the weekend.
Yeah.
It was as good, and it was a real, like, to now I felt Salah has been so effective in a great system for Liverpool, whereas that game really felt like him grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck in his, just like, you know, this is, Sadio's gone now, this is my team kind of attitude.
Only thing you care about.
That's right, the Football Pod is back. If GAA is the only thing you care about, make sure you don't miss the return of Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue.
You just knew it was coming down the tracks.
Subscribe to the Football Pod wherever you get your podcasts. OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.
All right, 19 minutes past 8 on Thursday mornings, OTB AM. Delighted to say myself and Johnny joined in studio by the Kilmacud Crokes captain, Shane Cunningham. Morning, Shane. How are things?
Morning. Very good now. Thanks for having me.
You're. It's Thursday now. You're not still. I know the Monday Club is still a thing in Gaelic after celebrating. Did you get the Monday Club after beating?
Yeah, the Monday Club is definitely still a thing, and I think a few lads at the Tuesday Club as well. But the Wednesday Club was called off by Robbie, I think, and we're back training tonight.
So you're the captain. So do you have to? Are you the one that has to cut the cord on the celebrations, or is it the opposite where you have to be the one to be the last man standing?
Yeah, I think I was the last man standing now. I don't think I was the last man standing this week, so I let them down in that regard. But I know, I think most lads will be sensible enough to call it a day when it suits them.
It's usually the Boar's Head, isn't it? Do you do a local pub, or is it a tradition every year?
Yeah, our tradition would be the Goat pub there in Goatstown. So we're usually down there for the Monday Club, and we head into town then after. So we had a good time.
What are the thoughts now that you've had bit of time to reflect on the game last weekend? Narrow 1 point win, but look, as we were talking about before we even came on air today, like winning two Dublin Senior Championships in a row is no mean feat. Winning any number of Dublin Senior Championships is no mean feat, but Na Fianna put up a stern challenge.
Oh, they did, yeah. Like Na Fianna were always going to be a really tough test. I've spoken before about how tough the Dublin Championship is, and definitely this year was the same. And I said maybe on paper it was probably the two best teams in the final, so it was always going to be a tight game, and it definitely was. But yeah, to do back to back is an unbelievable achievement. Obviously the last 2 years have been very successful, but up to 2018, so I started playing senior 2013, I didn't get near county final, so I'm definitely not taking these days for granted.
What's the change been?
Robbie Brennan, I suppose, he came in 2018 and he was just a new lease of life to the whole team, the club. He just got us back playing football and got the enjoyment back in it. Gave us a really good structure, and I suppose it just got a momentum maybe over the years, and we're very confident in how we play now and our team structure and what we want to do is on the pitch.
When you say that, so can you be under, I don't know, like, because football has changed, can you be in a system where the enjoyment is slightly gone out of it? Or when you say he brought the enjoyment back, how do you mean?
Yeah, so like as in, say, Kilmacud Crokes, traditionally, a football and club. And I suppose since I was growing up in Kilmacud, Port MacDonald from the age of 4 or 5 was getting us to kick the ball, and maybe in the previous management we went away from that a small bit. And Robbie, when he came back in, the emphasis was more so on attacking football, and I suppose 2018 was when we lost him unlocked. Then to an extent it was kind of gung-ho attack, and maybe it worked to a certain extent, and
you have to refine it a bit.
You have to do refine, yeah. Like, and I think it can work to an extent, but I think attack maybe wins games, and we kind of said defense wins championships. So over the years we've refined it and we've worked on it, and I think we're at a level now where we're comfortable at how we play.
Might just get you to pull that mic slightly closer towards you, Shane. But like, thinking about the Kilcoo game last year, like, is there an element of hurt pushes you on further because you were so close to an All-Ireland Championship last year, and heavy favourites, I would say, probably heading into the final, maybe not in your own camp, in your own heads, but does that disappointment kind of kick you on and give you that extra sting in your tail for this year?
Yeah, naturally enough. I suppose you're actually heartbroken after the game, and I probably didn't want to see a football for a few months afterwards. But yeah, when you go back training, for me anyway, that scar will always be there, but to make that scar a little less obvious would be to go on and try and mend it and go on and win one. So I suppose deep within, I suppose it is a motivating factor to try help your get over a defeat like that.
I think the flip side as well, Shane, is the likes of Nace of a wound from last year. If you meet that, they'll be like, we actually feel we didn't perform against you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Nace put up a tough challenge last year. I think they were missing one of their star forwards and Dark Irwin, and I'm sure they're coming in this year gunning for us, and we're going to have to be at our best in 2.5 weeks' time when we face them. So absolutely, like, as in, teams are definitely going to be coming up against us with the same approach.
You've one new element this year added, and that's Shane Walsh. And just looking at some of the stats here,
Shane himself is basically goalie, man. He's
of course.
Human killer rare.
We'll touch on that for sure. Shane Walsh scored 18 points for Kilmacud en route to the title. So came on as a sub against Templeogue. That game scored a point. Quarter-final against Coola, kicked 5 points, 3 frees and 1 mark. Semi-final started against Thomas Davis, scored 8 points, 5 frees, 145, and then in the final last weekend against Na Fianna, he was brilliant. 4 points, including 1 free, 4 brilliant points as well. What has he brought? It seems an obvious question, but like, what sort of attitude has he brought to training and even matches as well? It's quite clear that he's been a good acquisition.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a little bit of an understatement.
Just slight understatement there, yeah.
I think everyone in the country knows how good Shane Walsh was.
Yeah.
Like, when he was joining us, it was obviously going to be a major addition to us. What I've been most impressed about him is off the pitch and how well he's integrated into the squad. Like, obviously, I said last week, there's a concern about, not a concern, but a kind of when any young fella has joined the team, coming up from minor or coming up from the intermediate team, how they'll integrate with the team. And I suppose when Shane came in, that was maybe naturally the concern of how he might kind of fit in with the squad. But like I said, the bit I've been most impressed about him is off the pitch. He's made a massive effort to get to know everyone. With Galway going so far in the All-Ireland Championship, he was coming in the middle of our championship. It couldn't have been easier for him, but he's made a huge effort with our team, with the club in general. He was down supporting ladies football numerous nights at their county final. He's down coaching teams in the club. His mum and dad have been at all the games in the clubhouse there the last Sunday night, so they're getting to know your mums and dads. Him and his family have made a massive effort just to fit in with Kilmacud, and that's what I've been most impressed about him, to be honest.
What was your take on the whole controversy at the time? I know the whole transfer was a little bit protracted and took maybe longer than it should have or could have taken, but what's your thought on that generally within the GEA, that this whole issue of swapping clubs and people, I guess, needing to do it for work purposes and not travelling up the road?
Yeah, and looking at the ideal world, we would all love to be playing for our home club, and like Shane is no different. I'm sure he'd be loved to be down in Galway playing for his home club, but like you said, work circumstances dictate that he's up in Dublin, and I think Shane got to a stage where he felt like he couldn't travel up and down to Galway anymore for that, and he made a decision to move up. And look, I know it's not an ideal situation, but GA is part of the community, and I think people would rather see Shane Walsh playing football than not playing football. And if that was the case, that he wasn't able to play football in 3 or 4 years' time because he was travelling up and down to Galway, I think we would be better off.
I was saying this morning, Mannion and Walsh are probably two of the most talented footballers to have ever played the game. I think that's fair to say. It's not an exaggeration. What was the WhatsApp group like? We're talking about WhatsApp groups. Was it like, did you read it in the papers, or was it like, gee, Shane Walsh could be joining us? This could be interesting.
Yeah, we were out on holidays in Spain, and Robbie kind of pulled me over, and at Galway we were playing Mayo, and he just kind of pointed up the screen. Shane was there, and he goes, what do you think of Shane Walsh joining?
What do you think?
I was worried that I'd be getting dropped, first of all. And then, that was kind of the first time we spoke about it. We spoke.
Do you think it was a laugh? Is this because it was so left field at the time?
Yeah. Well, he kind of I did think it was a bit of a laugh at the start, and then he kind of goes, no, seriously. And we spoke about it more seriously after that. But that was kind of the first hint of the rumour I got about him joining. And we spoke about it more seriously afterwards, and how he'd fit in and how things would work. And it wasn't just a case of him coming in, that was it. There was things to be considered, and I think Robbie talked to a few of us. He spoke with the management team, and he spoke with the club chairman as well. It wasn't just a case of him coming in and that was it. There was things to be considered about.
If that timeline is right, you have to respect the people involved, because that was not leaked, in fairness. That was kept under wraps, and that's impressive in this day and age.
In the GA.
Extremely in the WhatsApp world that we live in. It's extremely impressive. Next time they'll leak it to off them.
You have a tight knit WhatsApp group, obviously. And what's he like in training then, Shane? Is it the type of thing where he's just doing things where you're like, this is ridiculous?
Yeah, he's probably better in training, and some of the stuff he doesn't train, you'd just be laughing at, he'd be dinking the keeper and stuff like that. So
2 feet as well.
Yeah, he is. He's ridiculous, and himself and Mannion are 2 quality players. So as inside forwards, we're kind of screaming for the ball, and the 2 of them are pinging the ball over from 60 yards. So in that regard, it can be difficult. But in training, he's unbelievable.
It's unfortunate for Paul, just to be injured again. And
yeah. I was heartbroken for him. His last year was tough for him. Obviously, I think it was against Port Arlington. He got injured and he missed the Leinster final then, and obviously the semi-final and final. So I think we touched on it earlier on about kind of making amends for the last year, and I think Paul was desperate to do that. He really was, and since he's kind of come back into the club and committed full time to the club, he's been unbelievable. He's been a massive driving force for it, and to be out injured again and to miss this campaign, it's really tough for him.
When you'd heard Desi announcing that Paul and Jack McCaffrey were coming back to the Dublin panel, what was your immediate thoughts? This is Kerry are finished. It's over.
I'll put words in your mouth.
I was surprised. I was surprised because, like, I wouldn't ask Paul about it. I'd be friends with him, but I wouldn't be asking him. Like, I think the last time I heard him speak about it was maybe with yourselves when he was on. And, he kind of indicated that he was going to be concentrating on the club, and I hadn't really talked to him about it or asked him about it. He gave me no indication, and he mentioned kind of before it came out in the media, and I said, no, fair play to you, go back. Like, he's still one of the best footballers in the country, so I'm sure everyone would be delighted to see him playing for Dublin next year, apart from Kerry maybe.
Can you relate to that, like, wariness of just the commitment involved? Like, because the club is hard enough.
Oh, it is, yeah, and like especially for Paul, like GA definitely doesn't dictate his life. Like, he's gone off travelling before. He's professionally, he's very driven. So like, he does like all of us. We've other things in our life apart from GA, and I think it just got to a stage where he wanted to explore those things, and he did. And he's going back next year now, and I'm sure he'll be unbelievable.
How do you see next year panning out? It's hard at this stage, early days yet. But I mean, if Dublin do have the two lads back in at full fitness. I mean, Kerry were brilliant last year, but it certainly adds an enticing element to the championship next year.
It does, yeah. Like, Kerry were very good this year, and they obviously beat Galway in the final. And Dublin ran Kerry very close, and obviously with the two lads going back in, it would definitely be an addition to Dublin. I suppose from a mindset approach, even for the rest of the wider Dublin squad, to have them lads back would be a massive benefit. So I'm sure Dublin will go in next year full of confidence, and it might drive Kerry on next year. It might kind of like get them kind of focused on things a bit quicker, and so yeah, I think it will just add to an interesting championship.
You're definitely mad to touch on the Galway links, aren't you?
Well, obviously Shane Hannon is a kind of a Galway name.
It is, but my dad's a Dunmore man. Yeah.
I'm from Newbridge, which I'm from. We're all essentially northeast Galway. You're like Killare and Tuam. Like, that is the absolute heart of. Like, it was one of my regrets that they moved the Tuam Stadium away as being the county ground, because Tuam is the home of football, or I would have thought. But you have the pedigree for the job, Shane. Could be a Galway.
So your dad's club is what, Killare?
My dad's club's Killare, so
Port Joyce's
club. Like,
you could transfer. You could transfer to Killare.
You heard it here first.
I think that would make as many headlines there. Shane was.
Tuam Stars as well.
Tuam Stars, yeah. So Port Joyce would have been my hero growing up. Like, honestly,
really,
I would have been going to Galway games when I was younger, kind of supporting Galway more so than Dublin, nearly. And Port Joyce would have been my hero growing up. And I've met him a couple of times. And then obviously my mum was from Tuam as well, just Dunmore Road there, so Tuam. So there's a few Galway connections there.
When we had the thing like Vinny's coming in to talk about, he had to be there. I mistook it that I had to give my 5, but like his performance, Shane Walsh's performance in that final last year, you're like, am I actually seeing this in defeat? Admittedly, but you're like, as Gaelic football has been so maligned at times, you're like, between him and Clifford, you're like, this is an amazing sport when it's played well.
Yeah, it really was. Like, the two of them in that game it was as good as kind of shoot off as I've ever seen. Like, you know, I was sitting at home thinking, Jesus, this is just going to make the headlines even worse now for us. Like, when he doesn't actually join,
pressure on.
But that day, just watching them, it was unbelievable. Some of the point scoring, it was phenomenal.
It was like Port Joyce against Meath in 2001.
2001.
He got 10 points or something.
Yeah.
I remember like Michael Donnellan would have been my hero growing up as
Dunmore
man. You know, I just upset. Even Jaff Fallon, Derek Savage, all those lads from that team.
Derek Savage,
do you remember going to? Would you have gone to Galway matches with your dad as a kid?
Yeah. I can remember like the tight one against Armagh maybe in 2001. I can remember going to a lot of those games. But like Savage, Donnellan, Port Joyce, Gary Fahey was he the captain back then? Those kind of lads would have.
When did you get your first Dublin jersey then?
Jenny Mac, when was that? It would have been, I'd say probably when I started playing development squads. Like, it was always my dad was always putting a Galway jersey on to me. Like.
And Pat was a Coola club man.
Yeah, so he moved up to Dublin in I think it was the 80s maybe, and he kind of joined Coola for a couple of years and played for Coola. So I think I touched on it before that was the kind of plan, was for me to play for Coola, and then Pork MacDonald came into my primary school, and
Monaghan man,
he is,
always a link.
There's always a link
back to the country, like, you know. He came in and he was the development officer for Crokes, and kind of the leaflet was given to us. I brought it home to mum and dad, and I wanted to go to Crokes, and that was it. Like.
Jesus, so the cooler manager and chairman are just sitting watching this right now going, oh, Jesus.
Because your hurlers as well, it's like the Crokes are just on a juggernaut at the moment.
Yeah, like there's not a doubt about it. We're doing really well, and touch wood, the hurlers can win on Sunday as well. But like I said, it's good at the minute, but from 2000 and I think our last county final before 2018 was 2012. So there was that 6-year gap where we were nowhere near it. So we're doing well at the moment, and I suppose these things come in cycles. So
Dublin must be nearly like a provincial inter-county system. It's that competitive, like.
Oh, it is. The Dublin Club Championship, I think it must be the most competitive club championship in the country. On any given day. Even in our group stages against some of the teams there. I was getting in the first game against Raheny, and I genuinely was nervous going into it, thinking it could be an upset in the cards here. Raheny, a really good side, they're good players. And that's kind of what you have to do in Dublin. If you're not on it, you get caught. Ballantyre in the next game, people were thinking that we're naturally stronger, we're going to beat them. It was a really tight game. The ball was cleared off the line with about 5 minutes to go. We were only 2 points up. I think we won the game by 4 points. So it's every game can be really, really tight.
It's touch and go. You obviously had to watch the Kilmacud lads lift the Andy-American Cup last year, but 2009 wasn't it? Kilmacud last won the Ireland Club. You probably remember watching that as a fan as well. I mean, that must have been special, and it's probably whetted your appetite more to do it as well.
Yeah, it did. For me, when I was growing up, I suppose my dream was always to play for Kilmacud, nearly more so than Dublin. It was always kind of looking at the likes of Darren McGee, Johnny McGee, Ross O'Carroll, Dave Nesta, Pat Burks. It was all those lads that I kind of looked up to. They were my heroes, watching Crokes, and to play for Kilmacud was always my dream. To be part of a team to win a championship was a dream, and to captain the club to do it is beyond kind of what I can put into words, really.
It's funny, we talked on the show the other morning, myself and Ger, about the sheer size of the club. I think TG Carr had some stats up the other day about the number of teams, say for example, if Fianna had was more than the number of playing members like Ballyhill Shamrocks had.
Yeah.
Obviously the Kilmacud numbers weren't far off. We talk about community spirit at some of the the village teams or the town teams across the country, but do you still manage to kind of bottle that community spirit and feel in Kilmacud regardless of the sheer volume of teams?
Yeah, I think it's easy sometimes just to dismiss clubs like Kilmacud and maybe Fianna and Ballybowden as just super clubs and there's nothing going on. And I can only speak from Crokes' perspective. But in Kilmacud we have obviously the football, we've the hurling, we've ladies football, we've camogie, but then outside of that there's a cycling club, there's a snooker club, there's an inclusion club for kids with disabilities on a Friday, there's an Irish speaking club, there's a mental health talks in the club. So it literally is the hub of the community. As in, not everyone's playing Gaelic football and hurling and camogie, but there's way more stuff going on in the club than just that. So it literally is the hub of the community. So it's nearly kind of opposite to what the perception is out there. So yeah, for me, I can only speak from Crokes' perspective, but it's a massive part of the community.
Even the fact that it's as you say, a dual club as well. It's funny that the football final last weekend is the same pairing as the hurling final as well. Kilmacud against the Fianna. That must be quite special as well to see the club able to compete on two fronts in two sports.
Yeah, it is. And obviously, I think Brian Sheehy is the only dual player on the team, and I think traditionally maybe Ross O'Carroll would have only been the one kind of playing both over the years. So there doesn't seem to be a massive crossover of players.
Why is that, you?
I don't know. I know down the country, I was reading one of Brian Sheehy's articles there before I came in, and he was kind of touching on falling in between two stools, and I personally think it could be part of that. As in down the country, if there's less players, you kind of have to facilitate them more. But when there's so many players playing up in Dublin, that I think it's very difficult to kind of facilitate everyone. It's okay for one or two to do it, but when there's so many players competing for positions, I think it's very difficult to do it.
So the manager, it'd be hard for him or her to say, well, you can't, if you're training one night less, maybe, I'll give player X the nod ahead of you kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, and I think that's actually exactly what Brian said in his article. He was kind of saying that he doesn't train any more or any less than say I do across the 2 weeks. He's 50% hurling, 50% football. But when Robbie or the hurling management go down to pick the team, if it is a kind of a toss-up, a 50-50 decision, if one lad has had an extra training to perform, it could just sway it marginally, like, you know.
I think it's kind of one of the sad things of the progression, like, because Conor O'Callaghan, like, if he hurled, you'd be like, Jesus.
You'd be unbelievable, yeah.
Like, Neil Donoghue would be like, yeah, we could win the All-Ireland here, possibly, who knows? Do you know what I mean? It's and it's just, I guess it's hard to see how it can happen in the modern era.
It is, yeah, like you're touching on Con there, like he broke Kilmacud hearts for a few years there when Coola were on those runs to the All-Ireland final. He put up massive scores against Crokes in county finals, unfortunately, but it's so hard, like, to do the duel. I think if you have 7 or 8 lads on each team, I think I think for me personally it would be very difficult to do well anyway.
Disruptive. Yeah. The sliding doors moments for maybe if you'd kept playing for Coolish, Con never would have got playing for Coola back in the day. So you just never know.
Learn a lot of things here first.
Exactly, yeah. Interested as well, Shane, when you're the captain of a team as well, you're obviously having to pick up little tidbits on leadership and trying to, I guess, lead by example. You're a Formula 1 fan as well, are you?
I kind of briefly one day mentioned that I watched the documentary, and next
one little throwaway comment.
Formula 1 fan. So,
but would you take? I guess my point is, would you take? You mentioned Bora Joyce was your hero. Would you take note of other people in other sports, or take interest in other sports, and go, right? That's someone who's a positive leader, a role model, who you can kind of almost take into your own game with Kilmacud as captain as well.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I honestly don't put too much thought into it. Like, I know it probably doesn't make for great radio, I wouldn't put too much thought into it. Like, I suppose, and I wouldn't even be massive one for roaring and shouting. Like, I just try to lead by example, and train and just do the best I can. And like, we're lucky enough in the team to have like your Rory O'Carrolls and your Paul Mannion and Craig Diaz and Shane Horns, like who are massive leaders as well. So like, yeah, like I wouldn't be one for roaring and shouting and just kind of copying other players or thing like that. I just try to go out and do my best and try give 100%. And I suppose if people want to kind of follow that, I'm all for it then.
Why were you given the nod as captain then, do you think?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. Like, as in, like, I suppose Craig Diaz was captain for a long period of time. We were joint captains then, and Craig and Andrea had their first child, and he was over in Barcelona for a few months last year after COVID. And kind of Badger said, "Look, you be the captain on yourself." Like, and yeah, I don't know. It was. I can't really explain why.
I've Andrea to thank, basically. Yeah.
I've Andrea, to thank for giving birth to me from Barcelona.
If you win the All Ireland, she'll be first on the list.
Yeah. Can I just ask you a final one from me, Shane? Like, we were, I guess, the topic has come up about referee abuse and treatment of referees quite often on the show, and even Jared last week was suggesting maybe the referees need to be mic'd up in Gaelic games like they are in rugby to kind of stop that, because there's just stories coming out every week, from the club game across the country as to treatment of referees. And like we were talking before you came in as well, the fact you're a guard in Sheriff Street as well. So this is
Kevin Street,
sorry. Yeah. Like, this is something that guards have to deal with as well. So it's it's a matter of respect, but what's your take on the whole situation around treatment of referees at the moment in the sport? Because it seems to be quite pertinent at the moment.
It does, yeah. It seems to be, I don't know, it's kind of a tipping point at the minute. Like, there's been an awful lot of bad headlines and bad press about it recently, and hopefully something can be done about it. Like, I know the GA, like, deservedly so, come down very harshly on people who are abusive verbally or physically towards refs. So, it does seem to be maybe at a tipping point, so something probably has to be done about it, because I don't know, without refs we can't play our games. They're an important part of the games. I know they frustrate people, but like, they're a massive part of the games. So yeah, like, it's something probably has to be done about it if it does continue the way it is.
Great stuff. Listen, Shane, much appreciated for coming in.
Thank you.
Sure we'll keep an eye out on you lifting the Andy-American Cup potentially later in the year. But
all about Galway.
Are you visualising that moment yet, or you don't allow yourself to get ahead too far ahead?
I look to Parnell Park in 2.5 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Long way to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Shane, thanks a million for coming.
Thanks a million.
That's Shane Cunningham, the Kilmacud Crokes captain. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mow. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. Up next, Cathal Mullaney joins us in studio for the sports news. First, here's our own Joe, Mick and Richie talking about the positively frightful weather that the country experienced yesterday. A more interesting description than it sounds. Back after this.
And there's some proper bass to some of that thunder as well today. This is probably anathema to people who are listening in the west of Ireland. They probably got away with nothing. But like, you're able to see the amount of flashes and where they were actually located on the map. And yeah, if you're in Howth, you got some light show today, I'll tell you that much.
I've never done that counting thing. I wouldn't have the wherewithal to do it.
It's no wives' tale. But there's a certain truth in it, because I think if it's right on top of you, you can see the lightning and hear the thunder simultaneously.
Okay.
It's to do with like light travels faster than sound. So that's the obvious logic. But I think I used to think it was 1 second equals 1 mile.
Okay.
Which can lead to a chilling conclusion. But I think it's actually 1 mile for every 5 seconds. That's worse.
It would be incredible if the physics of it equated to such an easy to measure time distance.
Yeah.
1 mile equals 1 second.
Yeah, no, that's too easy. I think it might be even worse than that. I think it's 1 mile every 5 seconds.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Surely
4,
not.
5, 1 mile.
I like the way you're saying it's worse.
That slowly.
I like the way you're saying it's worse, as if it's like it's more of an imposition upon all of us to watch these flashes, or to hear this thunder and go, "Oh God, it's terrible." Are you afraid of lightning, Joe?
No. I was working earlier.
You should be. Have a bit of respect.
Well, sorry, yeah, I'm sure.
Respect the weather, Joe.
I haven't actually checked the news. I hope everybody's okay. I mean, I'm suddenly conscious that it's far more serious for some people. But no, I mean, like, once it's safe, it can be kind of a pleasant enough thing in its own weird way.
I'd say you've experienced that on the golf course more than once over the years. Standing in under the trees.
Oh, I don't know.
Are you supposed to do that?
I don't think so.
Have you ever heard the siren?
You're supposed to stand under the trees.
I've had the siren and everyone runs in, yeah. So I haven't waited out in it. I'm not sure if you're meant to stand in the trees, under the trees, actually. Lee Trevino was struck by lightning 3 times. Why is that funny? He actually was.
I just wasn't expecting that. Like.
Yeah. Obviously, I presume on the golf course, but famously Lee Trevino lightning. I'll dig it up for you. Lee Trevino.
This is
riveting.
This feels like a slight tangent in the news around here.
Yeah. Several times. I think 3.
Have you ever been struck by lightning? 53106 for 30 cent.
Text in if you have a head. I mean, we'll get all the texts in this evening. We should really push on. The news round is upon us.
There was a wind turbine in Arklow that was struck with lightning today and is on fire, which doesn't sound great, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, look, the golf course can be one of the more dangerous places, famously.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're meant to stand under a tree or not. I wouldn't.
I would doubt it, actually, and I don't know why I think jumped to my mind. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and there's some proper bass to some of that thunder as well.
They wanted us to keep playing the clip, but yeah, lads talking about lightning last night, Johnny.
When will people learn renewables doesn't work? That was a mad image.
Yeah,
like the lightning was. I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that where like
it's fun as long as it's done in a safe way and you're not too close to it. It's actually quite enjoyable to watch.
I started to think of the dogs, because dogs. I always remember the dogs at home. Like it seemed in my youth, it was very, very rare that you get like even any thunder and lightning. Not to mind yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of the dogs and their kind of fear and all that. But we played on resolutely in that game of Astro. Badly, but we played on.
You tried your best.
Yeah.
Couple of comments. Great chat with Shane Cunningham, the Kilmacud Crokes captain, just before the ads. P-Well74 says, Galway loving. You're dead right. It absolutely was. And Brendan Turish, Shane is some man. Shane Cunningham, that is. See what you did there, Brendan. Like, you got my hopes up
full of them this morning.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this role suits you.
100%.
Wait till you move to Stony Batter. Everyone will be seeing you around Stony Batter. Oh, I heard about you. Moving to Stony Batter.
It's Smithfield, Johnny. But sure, Stony Batter is around the corner. Yeah. Same vibe. Cathal, Mullaney, good morning.
Great part, lads. How's it going?
Keeping well. You were watching United last night?
I didn't see much of the football last night, unfortunately, but by all accounts, Spurs were really poor.
Yeah.
And listening to Antonio Conte this morning, he admitted it as much. And Spurs are strange this season. Like I had great hopes for them at the start of the season, and bizarrely, it's their best start to a season since 1963-64. Which is hard to believe because they don't seem to be going that well. And when you look at the results, I think they scored 6 against Leicester, but bar that, they've struggled in the games that they've won, generally speaking, and they've lost the big games to the bigger teams. But still, they're third in the table. So it's kind of a bizarre set of circumstances. But I still would have hoped that they will mount a fairly seismic challenge for a top 4 spot at the very least beyond Christmas.
Some of the comments I never understand. Mark C. Ronaldo gone by January. Maybe, yeah, fair enough. But he adds, I'd sell Fred in the morning. He's useless.
Fred was
he certainly wasn't useless last night. It might be that
he just needs a position and a manager who believes in him. But he like, if Fred were to his energy last night is that he kept going right until the end when they were 2-0 up and the game was won. Great attitude, like, and deserved that bit of luck with the goal.
It's a confidence game, as you know, Johnny, from the Astro match last night. I think that's the 5th mention now of that.
It was at 1 o'clock. That was the thing. It wasn't even night time. It was 1 o'clock during the day. Now, lightning at night.
Off with this Astro match.
That was really bad weather at that time.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
It was because we arrived and I was like, we've kind of gotten away with one here. Oh no, in every sense.
You any good at the Astro, Cathal?
I haven't played Astro in a long time, actually. Usually, like a game at Christmas time now is about the height of it, to be honest.
Kills lads.
It is tough.
People who play and train the whole time, I think long term it's...
What's your footwear for your Astro matches?
I wear the moldies, like yesterday was torrential now, but I do wonder, have they done enough studies in terms of people who train and play on Astro professionally? It's not natural, like. And it was interesting, just when Derry played Treaty at the weekend, Tommy Barrett, the Treaty manager, said afterwards, which I had never heard before, he said the Astros holding Derry back. We, as a grossly inferior team here, could kind of manage them on the Astro, but if it were a grass pitch, we wouldn't be able. And I hadn't heard that before, and I thought it was an interesting argument that the Astros actually neutralising the difference here, even though it's their home ground.
Why do you think? Why
is
that?
Just used to it, is it?
I think it's the way the ball, like, it's just not natural. So you're like, the ball is holding up unnaturally. And Astro pitches then, like, you look at the Brandywell at times, it looks okay. And then you look at Oriel, they get worse. And obviously they're overused. Like when Rovers played in Europe, in Molde, was it? And the Astro pitch, you wouldn't even know it was artificial. But they get worse. And then they look more black than green because of all the pellets. And we're all familiar with that when you come home. And God forbid, like, you have a partner who's trying to clean the house because they're just a mess, like. But that's what happens. They put all these black kind of rubbery things, and I'm not a fan of it at all now.
We've had, you'll know the Kenny Cunningham food montage that sometimes go out on the evening.
Yes.
There's undoubtedly going to be a montage of you reminiscing about the game in the Astro and seeing how many times you can mention the Astro tournament.
That's great when you get to like 40 odd. And
is it that you're proud that you played in the bad weather and you stuck it out? Is that
not really? My point was that I'd never experienced weather like that before. It was nothing to do with me being proud or anything. It was just like there was so much.
You should be proud.
It was about 10 separate moments over the course of maybe half an hour where there was massive thunder and lightning, and then when you see the lightning, you're just you lose concentration. Like, I'm waiting for the noise of the thunder now. That's my excuse. Anyway.
Waiting for the thunder.
You're a good player, aren't you?
I'm all right. I'm already the Astro.
Have you seen him, Cathal?
Modest. He's too modest. I believe he's very good.
Sunday league player.
Cathal has a war wound from sport.
He was like,
don't play Astro, folks. Don't play Astro.
Yeah. It's a learning lesson. This injury happened to you a while ago, Cathal. So it's a learning lesson for anyone to get your sore hands.
Get it checked out. It's like 4 months ago or something.
Don't fall over in the Astro. A couple of people, Carrick United, Bruno Anonymous, 34 passes in the final third, highest on the pitch. Michael Jester says Sancho had a poor game, absolutely no impact on the game at all, and did none of the hard running that Rashford and Ante were doing. I've been guilty on this show a couple of times of defending Sancho to the hilt when Jer has called him a bust and different things. Colin Buhig is the same, I know, but and I'll still defend him, but he was admittedly poor last
He was actually, he was. Maybe a clash with Fernandes is the less. In fairness, Fernandes scored. He had the poor first half.
Yeah.
And is there a sense now for you that United are making progress?
You're always wary of getting too far ahead because they could go and lose to Chelsea on Saturday evening and be like, right, where does this leave them? But I think there's something Johnny mentioned earlier is the attitude of the players. They're hugging each other. They're smiling. Like under Ollie and certainly under Rangnick for a while, there was none of that. The body language was pretty poor. All of a sudden now, the fans are getting on board. The players seem to be enjoying the football.
Defensively, really sound last.
I mean, Varane
really
and Martinez, all of a sudden. Because can you imagine this time last year saying neither Maguire or Lindelof will be able to get into the team?
And like the two fullbacks, and like remember you have De Gea there if needs be, but like in fairness, as bad as Spurs were, they limited them to virtually no chances. Like Doherty had one kind of moment with Kane where he played a bad cross in the first half. Spurs were playing okay. I was like, this is going to be a very good game. But after that, in fairness, they created nothing, and Man United deserve credit for that. I thought Dallo and I thought Shaw, the whole back four were outstanding. I really did.
Yeah, very good. We've got a comment in for you, Johnny, from Peter M. Shane, can you ask Johnny, is he coming down to Cork on Friday night? 7,000 people to the champions.
Who was that comment in from?
Peter M.
The one thing I will say, Peter, the last times in Turner's Cross, best atmosphere all year at any game, both divisions, unbelievable. It was a 0-0 draw. I will be in Tala but also thinking of Galway United's dead rubber against Longford ahead of the playoffs. Best of luck to Cork City next season.
I meant to ask both of you actually, when we're touching on Cork City, their other manager, Matt Taylor's comments on well, he was talking about Georgie Kelly and how he's become a bit of a cult hero at the team, but then he was a little bit not condescending, but he was talking about the League of Ireland and the level. He says he's come from Ireland, which, with no disrespect to Irish football, is the equivalent of non-league level in the English pyramid. What did you?
I think that's fairly accurate. Okay. If you were to say quality-wise, Shamrock Rovers are better than that, but Shamrock Rovers will then play like part-time teams or a college team like UCD, and in terms of resources, we have a problem in this country. I don't know if it's like a post-colonial thing where we're so wrapped up with England. English football is a total outlier. It's unbelievably popular. Like, unbelievably. You've games in the 4th tier in England with like 15,000, 16,000 at Bradford games. You've games in the 5th tier with like 5,000, 6,000 at them. Like, so it's a complete outlier. There's massive money in it. And I actually think he's probably not far off. And facilities-wise, I bet you the 5th tier, the non-league in England is probably better than our Premier Division. Facilities are a joke in this country, an absolute joke. And if you want to get that done, it'll take like 10 years.
Yeah, like one of the lads even yesterday was making the point that he's at Fleetwood, and a few of those teams even have training facilities that are unlike anything. It's almost like Abbottstown kind of level stuff, you know.
It's grim because like if you want to, like, I was in Inchicore Friday and there were a few Scousers behind me, and it turns out one of them was Tom Gravosky's dad. So I was like, how are these Scousers but they were just talking about like how cramped the seats were, and like Inchicore is like one of the nicer grounds, but it's totally out of date, totally out of date. And it's like we don't even talk about like are GA grounds good in this country, like often uncovered. What are the facilities like? We're so far behind. There's so much money in this country, but we can't seem to get it right.
Briefly, Cal, what else is happening in the sporting world?
There's games tonight in the Premier League. Stephen Gerrard, a man under pressure at Aston Villa. They take on Fulham tonight. That's at 7:30 at Craven Cottage. Then at 8:15, another man under pressure, Brendan Rodgers in Leicester, can move off the bottom of the table. That's if they avoid defeat against Leeds. Arsenal laid down a marker in the Women's Champions League last night. They won 5-1 away to defending champions Lyon. In Group C, Chelsea begin their Group A campaign tonight away to Paris Saint-Germain. The Arsenal men's side also in European action tonight. They welcome PSV Eindhoven to the Emirates in the Europa League. That Group A match underway from 6. The Republic of Ireland under-17s also in action today. They begin their European Championship qualifying campaign this evening. They take on Armenia. That game takes place in Norway and it kicks off at 5. Some golf action this morning. Leona Maguire and Stephanie Meadow both in action at the LPGA Tour's BMW Ladies Championship in Korea. Maguire finished on level par. Meadow is 2 shots further back. Thailand's Atthaya Thittikul is the leader on 9 under par. Rory McIlroy has the chance to return to world number 1 this week if he wins at the CJ Cup. He's out from 3:20 Irish time this afternoon. Shane Lowry and Seamus Power also in action there. Niall Carney, Cormac Sharvin and Jonathan Caldwell tee off in the Mallorca Open this morning. Mark Allen in action at the Northern Ireland Snooker Open this evening. He goes up against Xiao Gudong in the last 16. That's scheduled to get underway at around about 7 o'clock, and there's racing at Thurles where the first goes to post at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Mark Allen's a good lad. Have you met him in your snooker tour?
I have. I saw Mark Allen play an exhibition in the Hillgrove Hotel in Monaghan Town a few years ago with Ronnie O'Sullivan was there as well. He had a 147, Mark Allen.
Wow, I'd believe that.
He's lost a lot of weight in the last 6-12 months.
So I'm talking about that he believes that'll stand him in good stead for the longer matches, like at World Championship level and stuff.
Because he was playing,
which is interesting.
When I went to bed last night, he was 2-0 down to Andy Lee, not the boxer, the Hong Kong snooker player, but obviously came back and won that match, but that was a late finish, and
I think it was like 2 a.m. when they finished, was it, or something?
To go again tonight, but he's got the stamina, and he's spoken very well about his financial issues as well in recent times. I think he said Ronnie O'Sullivan has been someone who's been a mentor to him and kind of took him not under his wing, but helped him through kind of the weight loss and things like that as well.
I met him. I was on this kind of poker table in Killarney, and it was like something to do with the Racing Post, but I ended up landed on it. But Mark Allen was one of the players, and I think he ended up winning. He won the poker match. It was him and Paul Carby on heads up, I think.
Right.
Which is quite interesting, but obviously got chatting to him. And Mark Allen was basically like, he was bluffing the whole way through heads up. And I was like, I know what you're doing here. But it was clear that Mark Allen didn't really have the patience for a long game of poker. And I was like, but what about your snooker? And he goes, it's a massive problem for me. My like attention span is not good enough for a long game of snooker. And I thought that was fascinating because whenever I wrote a game of poker, he just said, I'm not really suited to the game itself in that regard. Like, but hopefully he's gotten better as years have gone on.
Hopefully he kicks on for sure. Cal, thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Cathal, Mullaney there. OTBAM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It's 8:58 a.m. on this Thursday morning. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio coming up for you today. 1 o'clock, Lance Armstrong, the famous interview. 3 o'clock, Leaders' Questions with Stuart Lancaster. 4 p.m, it's a retro panel on the boxing ring. 6 p.m, it's OTB Gold, Barry Ryan on the Ascent. 7 p.m, of course, the show live this evening as per usual. Nathan Murphy in the hot seat. He'll meet Nathan Collins. John Giles also on hand as he usually is on a Thursday night, plus much more besides. You can follow OTB across all our social channels and subscribe to the OTB Podcast Network for all the very best in the latest sports content. We'll be back after these ads with Vinny Perth's You Had to Be There choices. First though, Philippe Auclair joined Joe on last night's show to talk about the issue of the Super League re-emerging and Florentino Perez's role in it all. Take a look.
So do you think Florentino Perez and his friends at Juventus and Barcelona, they understand that the European Super League, as they might dream it, will be very, very difficult to get off the ground, but they're just using the threat of it to leverage UEFA for as much as they can? Is that what's going on here then?
In part, I would think that the situation of all three clubs is extremely different. I mean, Barcelona is a basket case, as we know, economically speaking. Juventus are in a very, very bad place in terms of results on the pitch, and also financial results have been terrible. Real Madrid are not in that kind of position at all. One thing which is quite amusing is that when this internal Super League document, which is pointing the finger at English clubs dominating absolutely everything, well, only 2 English clubs have won the Champions League the past 10 years, Liverpool and Chelsea, and that's that. In the same decade, Real Madrid have won it 5 times, including last year. So there's a lot of the situation of all these clubs is different. This is an alliance of people who have a common ambition, a common goal rather, with apologies to Juan Mata for this, but certainly do not have a common appraisal of the game, or their own situations are wildly different. Real Madrid are not in for the same reason as Barcelona, as Juventus, and as the people they might take along in their jolly chariot. If anyone, to be honest. I think it's, as per usual, it's a power struggle between Europe's most powerful clubs and UEFA, who own, the biggest continental competition. I should add to that not all the points that the people from the Super League camp are making are invalid. Some of them are actually quite interesting. I mean, it's a fact that UEFA is both a competition organizer and it's fulfilling all these roles at the same time. It's not a governing body as such, but it defines the rules of the competition. So you could think, okay, there's a case to be defended here that UEFA perhaps wields too much power in organizing competitions in which Europe's top clubs are taking part. But that's only something that they're using as a weapon. They don't have the good of the game, whatever it means these days, in mind at all. They have their own interest. And their own interest at the moment is they can see that there is this new phase coming, starting from 2024-25, where we have this new Swiss system being installed. And I think they simply want to have as much purchase on that as possible.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
I'm going to test you, Stephen. Who's on the bench for Arsenal? Whoa, no pressure.
Well, Kenny,
no pressure.
He actually played in the game.
Time up.
He played in the Europa League match.
Not Pat Jennings either.
Well, we're just seeing him now, stripping down on the bench, Kenny. You can see him.
Is he? Whoever he is.
I'm trying to
Who is that man? Who is that man stripping on the bench? Put them big gloves on.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.
It's so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
You had to be there.
Yes, the latest episode of You Had to Be There on OTB AM. We have Vinny Perth, the former Dundalk manager, in studio with us. Morning, Vinny.
Morning. How are we doing?
You have an interesting selection here. I don't know why in my head I was thinking we're going to have five soccer picks here. Just before while the ads were playing there, you mentioned you were close to a couple of moments, very famous Irish soccer moments, but not not there, so you couldn't pick them.
Yeah, it's difficult because when I got asked to do this, it was like, oh, that's straightforward. But then the more you realise you weren't actually at a lot of the big moments.
Yeah.
And, young enough to remember even, say, Dave O'Leary's penalty, etc. But most of us remember George Hamilton as opposed to being there in the stadium. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. And there's a couple, like, I was at I've seen Ireland beat the All Blacks as well quite a couple of times.
Right.
And still didn't make it into my list. So it's interesting. A couple of strange moments that pop up into those big moments.
Well, it is rugby where we'll start. So your first pick is we'll go in I guess order of years. Michael Lina against Ireland, the World Cup 1991, Australia 19, Ireland 18, 20th of October 1991. Today exactly. So we're on to the anniversary, which I've just realised.
That was Lansdowne Road, wasn't it?
Yeah, Lansdowne Road. So this is a moment where Michael Lina, he's forever linked with that Gordon Hamilton try a few minutes earlier, but a gutting moment for Irish rugby, but what a moment.
Yeah, it was an amazing moment. And I suppose for context, I go to a lot of games, still do. And my wife does check in on me sometimes to say, I go to a huge amount of events on my own. I'm really, since a kid. So before I go into Michael Lina, say, for example, I remember watching in Dalymount Park, France, and I only was checking the dates on it recently. I was 10, 11, travelled over to Dalymount Park from Tallaght on my own.
Just hopped on the bus?
You just hopped in the bus. Michel Platini was the manager. Remember also in Dalymount, Ireland played, I think it was Morocco or something like that, and going again on my own and standing on the terrace. So they're obviously different times, you know, in terms of travelling across the city now, but I went to this Ireland-Australia game on my own as well, as a schoolboy. And some of my family are involved with St Mary's Rugby Club, obviously, and I ended up, don't know how I picked up a ticket, it was that long ago, but ended up at a really huge moment in Irish sport at the time. And Irish rugby has had so much success of late, but back then beating Australia was unheard of. And for context, for some of my picks is what I'm sort of, what's the word, middle-aged now, so not everything
that
was
already today,
I sort of half heard it, but not everything was on your phone, not everything was on TV. So seeing someone like Michael Lina was only a snapshot, it was only a couple of times a year. You couldn't just turn on YouTube and watch moments of different bits and pieces. But this Australian team, and I suppose what I got out of that game was, obviously there was the amazing moments in terms of Ireland's tries and people jumping onto the pitch, but it was like you're watching, for me, and maybe that was the sort of the coach or the way my brain worked. You were looking at a tactician. Like he was a number 10. You were looking at this. I was just in awe of him. And what happens with the great teams is there's a myth about them, and there was a real sense for me. Even someone like I was barely a teenager at that stage, 10, 11. I'm watching it going. There's an air of inevitability about Australia scoring, and they ultimately did. And it turned out it was him that caught the big moment, and it was a choice. I sort of go to these games and you watch people, but I remember watching Lina over Campese as well was sort of the big name at the time. But Michael Lina scored all the points on that day, and he was just sensational. And he got a little bit of luck with the try, but at the same time, the greats are always there when it's there to steal that moment.
My nephew went to Old Trafford last night, his first game. He's like 10, I think. And, you know, I'm wondering, is it nostalgia or were things better when we didn't have access? It was like, as you say, because like back in those days, even the Premier League, there wasn't that much football on the box. Like, no, it was kind of better for that in a way.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt quality has improved, but also, and I'm guilty of it myself, we all also overanalyze what happens in a game. So if we were if that game was to be analysed now, you'd have radio shows, you'd have newspapers, you'd have, and I think we're sort of missing a little bit of substance in terms of sport at the moment. So, like on your point, I remember Liverpool 3-0 down as a kid, and against Manchester United.
Oh,
if you
what a
remember,
night that
Razor, I was there that day.
You were at the game?
Yeah, and Razor Ruddock
didn't make the list.
Amazing header. No, but because Liverpool weren't that good.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, they were terrible.
They were terrible.
If you look back, they were terrible.
They were terrible on the day, and they weren't
Nigel Clough with a pair.
Yeah. So, but they're magical moments, and it's I suppose like you think of kids going to stadiums. It's funny. I go to a lot of stadiums in the UK, and I just not. It doesn't have the same sense of what's the enjoyment, or I think there's something missing at the moment. And you go to the continent, and I think probably one of the best sort of sporting moments I ever had in my life was sitting in Warsaw in a Champions League playoff game with Dundalk. And I remember turning to Steve Williams at one stage going, like in the middle of the game, as a coach you're lost and you're watching, you're in charge of set pieces, of who's marking who, and going, Willow, this place is amazing. I used another word. If I lived anywhere within an hour of here, or 2 hours, I'd drive here every week.
One of the best atmospheres I've ever
experienced. Yeah. And it was just amazing. So I don't think you get that in the UK.
No, absolutely.
There's times where big games, like obviously you look at City and Liverpool the other day, there was a real tension around it. But a lot of the games now are just, it's over, sort of sanitised, and it's just too quiet.
Totally. These moments are nearly probably heightened in your head, like when Australia go on a week later to beat the All Blacks and then to beat England in the final. Like it probably heightens it, that the fact that this is the team that go on to win, I suppose. That
and maybe when we go through my list, there's probably a common thread in it. When you look at what Lyon had done in terms of winning the World Cup, and he said it himself, that try was his best moment in his sporting career. So it happened in Lansdowne. I happened to be there, and it was against Ireland. Obviously, 19-18. In terms of the score, if you'd have been in Lansdowne talking about, it was an amazing atmosphere.
Yeah.
But as a young kid, I was already watching this guy going, he's basically tactically controlling the game, and I only had even now I only have a sort of small understanding of rugby in the sense of where it comes from, but it was like the quietest place you've ever. Once he scored that try, it was just the whole atmosphere was sucked out of the ground, and it was an amazing moment for them because they went on to win a World Cup, and I think they beat the All Blacks about a week later, and knocked out England as well. So they've done it sort of the hard way, away to Ireland as well. So it was just you sort of. I don't know whether you know it or not, and it's easy to say it after, but you sort of felt you were watching a piece of history, and one of the greats was that they're doing something special in front of your eyes, and that's when, you know, if you ever see the sort of tries back or the moments back, if the hair stand up in the back of your neck, you know you've experienced something special.
This is kind of soppy nostalgia as well, but Vinny's on about the atmosphere in Lansdowne in those days in the rugby. Like, watch back some of the documentaries, no comparison to now. Like, and Ireland was downtrodden as a rugby nation. Like, there would have been a lot of games where Ireland played well and kind of faded like late on, like that game in particular. But in the 80s, when like Ireland won a couple of triple crowns, really, really poor country in terms of and the atmosphere. Now you go to games and it's primarily fairly wealthy people in the audience having beers. Ireland are very good, and it's just not the same. It actually isn't, and it's. I wasn't at rugby games those days, but I know I'm right on that because you listen back, it's amazing how noisy the place was.
But if you watch Ireland's try, maybe 22, like the crowd celebrate the try with the players, and in that corner flag, and now that would be a fine. That would be, you know, it's
and it was unbridled.
Happened, and I understand why it doesn't happen now in terms of for security reasons and different things, but. And in this day, that wouldn't happen now. So seeing the crowd actually celebrate the try with the players on the day.
Your second pick, Vinny, is 1995. Again, Irish dreams crushed, this time by a 19-year-old Patrick Kluivert. So this was a Euro 96 playoff.
Big Jack.
Kluivert gets a couple of goals. So it's 13th of December 1995. The Netherlands 2, Ireland 1. This was Anfield?
Anfield, yeah. So I stood on the cup. Richard Dunn had recently signed for Everton at the time. So the two of us went to the game.
Right.
And it's interesting the career he went to go on to have. But the two of us stood on the cup that day. And obviously the Jack moments were special. If you ever see the footage at the end of the game, You'll never walk alone. We want Jack back. I mean, the two of us stood there and sang it as loud as anybody, and he came back out with his flag. And but at the same time, you knew it was the end of an era. That the team was tired. It was time to sort of regenerate that team, and you already got that sense. But Kluivert, again, you know, when you look back on players now, you look at Haaland and what he has become. We've known that and we've seen that footage for the last 4 or 5 years. With Kluivert and what he was doing at Ajax was under the radar in many ways. Now, he had just scored the winner in the Champions League final at 18 years of age, don't get me wrong. But it was sort of, the TV coverage has sort of helped my memories, if that makes sense, because it was all of a sudden I was watching a star. Now, he was part of an amazing Overmars at that time, was world class as well. Seedorf had just come through that Ajax team, Van der Sar and goal. So it was sort of a golden generation of Ajax players. But he, on the day, like Paul McGrath playing centre half, he on the day, he could have had 5 or 6 and he scored 2 amazing goals. And albeit he crushed Ireland's dreams. And we had a couple of chances. I remember Terry Phelan blazing over the bar and maybe a half volley from the edge of the box by McGrath. But on the day, the Dutch just looked world class, and him in particular. And to see somebody so young, like 18 years of age.
It's funny to think back to it. We were in 2 World Cups in a row at that stage, and it was almost like, I remember thinking, I would have been 14 or that. I was thinking there was almost this surprise that, yeah, we were fairly beaten by Holland in a one-off. It's like, geez, are we at that level now where we just have to accept and look at like we had riches then that we didn't understand.
Yeah, and even and sort of, it was still Cascarino playing up front. Like, so and I think world football was beginning to change, and there's a few moments where for me it changed. I mean, you look at France '98. I think that's when football changed to real athleticism. You look at, we'll go on to Spain later on in 2012. That's when the sort of possession game and the ability to keep the ball changed. But it was like this Dutch team, young, youthful players. With the same time, they, you know, the likes of Seedorf wasn't shy about making a tackle in any way, shape or form. But it was a different way of doing it, and we looked tired and all that day. And ultimately, Jack's tactics had run out of its sort of lifespan on that day. And Kluivert punished us so much. Like his dink for the second goal late in the game was just like it was right in front of us on the cop. But it was amazing to see, and I just went. I know his career, sort of. I don't know. He had an amazing career in many ways, but he got a knee injury heading into that World Cup, and I know he did score against England in the 4-1 defeat at that championship, but he wasn't the same player for a couple of years. Went on to have a brilliant career, I think, at Barcelona. But it was like, it was almost like, for me, as much as I'd seen him on and off the TV, as I said, to see somebody like that live, you go, wow, this guy is the real deal. And it was sensational on the day.
Is 16-year-old Richard Dunn, centre half, in the crowd standing beside you going, I would have stopped Kluivert there?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember him saying that too much, but it's funny. It's funny when you think of like singing "We Want Jack Back" and different things like that. When you think of it, there was no cameras around at the time. There was no camera phones, no text messages. He had just signed for Everton, and you think the career he went to go on to have. And he marked Kluivert not that long after that, to be honest. A couple of years later, he ended up marking Kluivert. So I don't remember having in-depth conversations with him at the time in terms of what would you do against this guy, because you know yourself, it seems so far away. But it was a special moment. But I think the Kluivert part of it for me was amazing. But also the whole occasion, that was one of the best occasions I think I've ever been at Anfield. And then the sort of, it was a weird thing where the Dutch fans started applauding, and you knew they were applauding the Irish fans. So then the Irish fans started applauding the Dutch fans, and it was just this
good
weird
vibes all around. Just
this great vibes. And then we came out of the stadium. Then all of a sudden got hostile because typical the wrong word, but the British police were there, and you could tell. They at that time they policed football games completely different, and
something was in the air.
Yeah, and there was something in the air. And I remember we were only young lads. We jumped in a taxi and went back to Richard's Digs at the time and just got out of the city as quick as we could. But there was still that sort of hooliganism element around British football at the time, because it was obviously played in a neutral venue. So
I'm sure poor Alan Kelly in goals remembers Patrick Cliver quite well from that night as well.
Yeah.
Your third pick is a better memory. It's also against the Dutch, but Roy Keane's intrepid performance in 2001. This one went the right way. So this is the 2002 World Cup qualifier course, September 1st, 2001. We all remember what happened with the goal with Jason McAteer, but Roy Keane's performance that day was something else.
Yeah, I think if you remember in the first minute, he just nailed Mark Overmars, and he didn't get booked, in the whole game.
Right, he didn't get booked at all.
No,
remember Jaap Stam's tackle on him going into the goal. Then
just in the build up for the goal, and I remember Mark Van Bommel and him went up against each other, and he just had him on a piece of string. It was like a toy.
Couldn't happen to a nicer fella.
Yeah. But I tell you, like, it's funny. We now the Roy that we know now. It's because I grew up sort of a Liverpool fan, but I was always quite neutral in terms of, even to this day, who I like, who I didn't like. I never had a real love for Roy Keane.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but that day, I remember it was the old Lansdowne as well. So you were up in that old sort of main stand, and the atmosphere was obviously, we were expecting to beat teams like Holland at the time, when you think of where we stand now or over the last sort of 10, 12 years. But I think Roy, he had this, people have different views of Roy Keane in terms of how he played, but he had this calmness about him. I know the game ended frantic, as in the Dutch had 6-7 forwards on that stuff, but if you actually go back to the game, he was so controlled and measured and everything. Calmness was personified. His passing range went to slow the game down, and also what he never really gets the credit for when people talk about Roy Keane the player, his ability to make breaks into the box and in behind people, and that stretches midfields, and particularly the way the game was played then, nearly 4-4-2s. I remember one time he made a run in behind. It was in behind Stam, and McIntyre overhit the ball, goes to the end line, and like the crowd went quiet, and you could hear Roy nailing McIntyre, and like McIntyre the usual.
They obviously kissed it up years later.
Yeah, no, they obviously made up as it developed. But his performance that day, and
it's the tragedy of what we knew was going to happen in Saipan.
And that's the killer part. Like, he obviously had such high standards, but I don't think if he didn't have them standards, Ireland would have won that game. Like they had a corner at one stage, and it's clear to the edge of the box, and it's a brilliant moment and it sort of summed up Roy in many ways, because people will sum him up by the tackle on Overmars, but he broke about 60 yards. Jaap Stam is sort of running after him. He's the only one nearly in the Dutch half. He just kills the ball with his studs and just rolls it back to a Gary Kelly or someone behind him, and just like really, really calm. And I remember at one stage there was a ball back. Richard Dunn played that game because he came into the team on that game. It was him and Steve Staunton as centre half. And all of a sudden the Irish players were passing through lines, because Roy was demanding of them to do it as in his positions, or he wasn't, because of the level he played at. I remember one stage he got the ball, the Dutch had he won a ball in the midfield, gets it out of his feet, turns. I actually remember, because obviously I was mates with a guy playing here. This was weird. And he just fires it back to Richard Dunn, who first time passed it out to Gary Kelly. And you're like, and it was so almost even at that time un-Ireland, like, because we were starting to transition.
Have we had anyone like that since as well, Vinny? This is the thing. We've never had that midfield general. You look at us even against Armenia, where we lose our way very quickly. We change the midfield. We just haven't had anything like that, where it's like he demands it. Like I look after this ball for you. Yeah,
we've had flashes of brilliant moments in terms of people have gone into that position and done really, really well at different stages. But no, of course, we've never had that world-class midfielder. Like, in fairness, in that game you had, when you think back to the previous Dutch game, maybe in the playoff, Duffer was brilliant on the day as well, to be fair to him. Kevin Camban played, Gary Kelly played, Steve Fillon came on, I think. But Duff, Dunn, Robbie Keane, obviously. But that is such a pivotal position in football that if you don't have that, you're going to struggle. And he set the tone for everything that was good about us. So, no, we've had, like, if you go to the Euros in 2012, I think probably our best player was Keith Andrews at the time in midfield. We've had different moments where Josh Cullen is now trying to emerge in that position, but he's very different than what Roy Keane is. So it is a big problem for us. We've sort of stopped developing those I think we stopped developing number 10s in Irish football, and that sort of really great number 6.
Just looking at the Dutch lineup from that day as well. Van der Sar was in goals. Then the back four: Mario Melchiot, Kevin Hofland, Arthur Newman, Jaap Stam. You Philip Cocu, the captain for the Dutch, Overmars, Van Bommel, Zenden, and then Kluivert and Van Nistelrooy up top. And then off the bench, Hasselbank, Van Hooijdonk, Van Bronckhorst. Didn't realise as well, like, Steve Finnan comes off the bench on 60 minutes.
Yeah.
On 67th minute, he crosses for...
We were down to 10 so long as well.
We were down to... So Gary Kelly got sent off as well. And but going back to Roy...
That's just literally 2 minutes before Finnan comes on.
And I want to explain this well enough. Go back to Roy though, right? He picks up the ball on just inside his own half on the far touchline. Van Bommel is close to him. Amazing little bit of skill. He drives straight across midfield. Jaap Stam jumps out of the back four, which actually helps the goal. Makes a stupid tackle on Roy Keane. Damien Duff is sort of in central. He's off his wing position. He plays the ball, Damien Duff. Then Stam absolutely nails Roy Keane. And then Duff goes out to Finnan. Whether it's a great cross or not, it's overhit cross.
Doesn't
matter. The Dutch are out of shape because of what Roy had done. If you ever watched the goal back. And then McIntyre, obviously, it's a brilliant finish. But the goal came from Roy's brilliant bit of skill against Mark Vommel right on the left touchline.
Was that our best team that we've ever had that day, in the sense of, because Keane didn't play in the World Cup? So was that as good as it got for Ireland, or would you go back to the the late 80s, around the sort of early Jack era?
I suppose I think you would, in terms of, I think for players we had, in terms of around Aldrich, Houghton at the time, Ronnie Whelan, those people were in and out of the team. Defensively were really strong. I think the team that played against Italy in the 94 World Cup was probably our best team. McGrath and Babb at the back. Houghton, albeit off the right. People say Jack never had tactics, and I think that suits the after dinner speaker type of element. But if you even go back to that goal Ireland scored in the 94 World Cup, John Sheridan dropped short. Andy Townsend was more of a sitter. He was the runner in the game. Yeah. John Sheridan dropped short, gets it off Dennis Irwin. Yes, he goes long, but actually Houghton is in that sort of number 10 position that he came in off the line and then chips one over the keeper. But that team, I think, was probably where we were at our very, very best.
Your fourth and penultimate pick on You Had to Be There this morning, Vinny, is Euro 2012, another painful memory. Andres Iniesta moments as Spain beat, isn't it? Yeah, let's talk it all through. Spain 4, Republic of Ireland 0. Murder on the Gdansk floor, I think, was one of the headlines. And one of the
having that one.
Brilliant one. A tough night for Ireland, but what a night for Iniesta.
Yeah, and again, it's a bit like Lyon at the start, right? Iniesta was amazing on the day, and I remember sitting in the stadium saying, because again it's 2012, so you're starting to see a lot more football, and he's part of this great Barcelona team that was really good. The Spanish had sorted a lot of their problems out, in terms of the Real Madrid were so strong, Barcelona players, the clash of these sort of players, and they grew into this tournament, and I think they brought football to a new level. It was he played sort of narrow off the left, but he had this freedom to go and roam everywhere, and he was turning up in different positions. He did direct handing to the goals he scored that night. He went on to be player of the tournament. He was just simply sensational throughout that tournament. And to see him live and to see what he'd done to that Irish team, that Irish team were tired at the time.
Yes.
It was a step two. And it was difficult. It was a difficult night, because around that time in 2012, funny, I went to the tournament. I don't know what weight I was, right? When I went for 14 days. I was in around the team hotel. I know everyone was, but I mean properly in around the team hotel. And I think I came back about 1.5 stone overweight at the time, heavier than what I remember getting off the plane Dublin Airport. My wife picked me up going, look at the state. I was in bits.
And your weight isn't great either.
Weight wasn't great either. But it was an amazing time. And for someone, I had just sort of finished with football and I was doing bits and pieces. Because when you're involved in football, a lot of these tournaments, particularly in League of Ireland terms, happen. That's why you're at not many of them. They happen while sort of we're in season or different things. And this time I had the freedom to go. And it was an amazing experience, that European Championships. Ireland were really, really poor. But I think I seen one of the great midfielders of the great generations. I think I seen one of the most amazing performances that any midfielder has ever put in from an Irish sort of, or against an Irish team or anybody I've seen. And then it played out. That team was just cruise to the European Championships.
Looking at, like, that Spanish starting lineup as well. Like Casillas, Arbeloa, Piqué, Ramos, Jordi Alba, Xavi, Busquets, Alonso, Silva, Torres, Iniesta, and then just to refresh people's memories, we were only 1-0 down at half time. Torres 4th minute, and then second half, David Silva gets a goal 4 minutes into the second half. Torres gets his second on 70 minutes, and then Fabregas in the 83rd. So at half time, we're probably thinking, geez, they're all over us, but if we just nick a goal here.
You do, and you do think like that, particularly with, say, Robbie on the pitch or Duffer, we're hang in here. And it was, in many ways, that was the Trapattoni way in terms of staying in a game and hopefully some big moment can happen. And a lot of Ireland's big moments around that time did come, like the goal against Germany, when you are getting bashed a little bit and then one big moment from people. But I think the big moments had gone out of that group, unfortunately. But if you even go back to, and this is where my brain works from a tactical point of view. All of a sudden, Spain, there was a team playing with no wingers here. So you'd like Iniesta playing narrow, and the responsibility was Arbeloa and Jordi Alba to go as almost wing backs, even though they weren't wing backs. So Spain, to play that way, had to keep the ball for fun. So the Xavi, Iniesta,
and they could.
Busquets, and they did. Now, it's funny, I was only recently checking the stats. It's saying that our Spain had 66% of the ball, right? But it actually on the night felt like they'd 80 to 90% of the ball at the time. So albeit we were 1-0 down, we were completely and utterly outpassed. And in that moment, that was a real snapshot of Iniesta. He got 3 man of the match throughout that tournament. Awards, won the player of the tournament, and as I said, I think, he had amazing players, David Silva, and again, I don't think Torres started the final, so they were changing how people played football for me around that time. It was David Silva, but it was a new way of playing football, and it was just amazing to see in terms of. I'd like to think that. That was 2012, so when we went into Dundalk in 2013, we just copied Spain, but can't get away with that.
Pretty much did.
Yeah, your final one, Vinny, you got a trip later that year in 2012 then in December over to the States. Kobe Bryant against the Philly 76ers, 16th of December.
This is a left field one now.
Yeah,
I'm sure people didn't see this was coming. So briefly, I was over with the NFL hockey team, the Philly Flyers. So I was over with them for a week. Had something I'd pre-planned. Again, this was just before I went into sort of coaching, and but they were on strike at the time. There was a hockey strike. It went on for nearly 6 months. So, but we got to see them train, got to be around them. But just happened to be an NFL or the NBA game was on in Philly while I was there. Went online and I got like courtside tickets for something ridiculous, like $100 on the day. Jeez. Like it was like I was like, there's a mistake here. And again, you didn't have on my phone. I don't think we had video at the time, but you certainly had. I have a picture on my phone of Kobe scoring a 3-pointer, and I'm literally. And when he got taken off, or when he got set down, he was like 2 yards in front of me. It was amazing. Jesus. And I wasn't a big NBA fan at the time, or probably still amn't, but he calls it to. It's amazing. So I'm talking about Iniesta and the moment he had, or Michael Laine saying it was his best match. So Kobe talks about the 2012-13 season being his best of his career.
Right.
Now they didn't ultimately win the top prize at the time, but he scored 34 points on the day, and he
6 assists and 4 rebounds as well.
He was just like the stadium was electric, and there was spare seats around and different things. But they were playing away from home. But every time he got the ball, it's what the greats do. You just get this sense of like anticipation, something magical is going to happen.
This was in Philly, this game.
This was in Philly.
So a lot of the home fans were pretty disgruntled, no doubt on that.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was like it's almost like they were watching one of the greats doing something great. So it was. I think statistically it was his best season, but to score 34 points of 111 doesn't seem that much, but it was huge at the time. No, it's not something that people generally do, and what you can't explain when you're watching someone that is that great what he has, what's the special. And we often use this phrase going back to even Dundalk about creating a myth. There was this. You're almost looking at someone mystical in front of you. Like you're talking about 2 yards sitting in front of you, 5 yards from the throw line. You're watching them getting 3 points, but you also then you do realise. So you watch a lot of NBA on TV, and the athleticism that's needed, and he was a cut above everybody at the time.
Can I ask you very briefly? I'm probably taking this over here, but do you look back now at that 2016 run, and you look at Rovers haven't scored a goal yet in 4 games, and kind of look a bit out of their depth at times in Europe? Do you look back and think, Dane Massey hit the crossbar in Tala against Zenit, and we were nearly 7 points from 3 games and top in the group? Did this actually happen? And you're like, you expect Dundalk then struggled afterwards the next time, but you're like, Jesus, this happened.
Well, like, not to go up on a tangent, Johnny. It's 10 years. When next season starts, it's 10 years since since Stephen took over Dundalk. And sometimes, again, you're talking about therapy sessions. Sometimes I have to remind people, I was with him that day as well when he took over. It was generally the 2 of us. Right,
so you were starting off, and he's almost kind of trying to reinvent himself after.
So I was there for that moment. So, but I think in the last 10 years, that Dundalk team is there. Everyone argue about the great Shelbourne team, about great Rovers team that won 4, but that is one of the greatest teams and the greatest achievement of a League of Ireland team in terms of where they took the game to. You talk about moving the game on other levels. I think they did that. Fitness levels in the league, professionalism in the league went up another level because to compete with Dundalk, you had to.
Didn't lose one game in the group by more than a goal.
And so, but to sum up the way, and I don't know whether every coach thinks like that, but to sum up my brain, I've got probably 3 memories in the last 10 years of different things. And the 3 of them are Dane Massey hitting the post, because I think we'd have got out of group if that goes in. I think Zenit would have, I don't mean give up, but 2-0 down. They were going to get out of the group anyway. I think we would have got out of the group if that ball goes in. The penalty shootout in 2019 that Dundalk lost. We probably deserved to lose the game. We lost Patrick McElhenney and Chris Shields in the build-up. But I remember that, and I remember last year against Vitesse Arnhem. I think if we score in our sort of last 10-minute spell, we knocked them out and we progress. So that's a long-winded way of saying to you, you only remember the sort of, not the failures, but they're like, I had amazing moments with that team and made doubles, European runs, experience stuff. But they're the stuff you remember. And what I'd say on that is a long-winded answer in your Shamrock. Like, you have to make these moments special because, yes, the Conference League has given people a chance to play European football regularly, but I just think there's big moments passing some big players by, and I hope they don't regret that.
Totally agree. And he could have said, like, I was there for Robbie Benson's goal in Warsaw. I was actually on the bench. Or I was there for
Robbie Benson.
Patrick McElhenney's goal in Arnhem. You're like, ugh.
You know what? I debated Daryl Horgan's performance away to Zenit St. Petersburg, but we didn't win the game.
Yeah.
And again, Patrick McElhenney hit the crossbar in the 91st minute. I still can see that moment happen in front of me. I actually can't remember
the orange ball,
the other big moments that happened in that day, but I can remember that brilliant move, Daryl Horgan picking it up, driving past people, and pinging the ball out to McElhenney, counter-attack, and we hit the crossbar to go 2-0 in the game. So that, again, maybe I'm different, but it's funny that you remember that moment and not the other big moments. And that's where you hope that the Shamrock Rovers group don't live to regret not seizing the moment of what it is.
Yeah, great moments there, but sadly none of them made the final 5. So just to recap, Michael Lina, Ireland World Cup defeat in 1991. Then we went to Patrick Kluivert in 1995, Roy Keane's performance in 2001, Iniesta wrecking us in Gdansk in 2012, and then Kobe Bryant in Philadelphia, December 2012. Vinny, great picks, unbelievable. Thanks a million for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
That is the latest episode of You Had to Be There.
It was so unexpected.
It's one of those you had to be there moments.
You had to be there.
It subsequently genuinely did change everything about my life.
I had to be there.
Yeah, 9:38 AM on this Thursday morning. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com. OTB AM back tomorrow morning. Myself and Adrian in studio will be live with the new Laois hurling manager, Willie Maher. Alan Quinlan will reflect on Andy Farrell's squad announcement and, of course, look ahead to the weekend's URC action. A week on from Damien Brown's appearance on OTB AM, his boatmate for the first couple of weeks anyway, Fergus Farrell, will be in studio to tell us about that epic voyage from New York to Galway and how their journeys went different ways after the 13 days. In the meantime, we're leaving you with the very best of Wednesday Night Rugby. Enjoy. See you tomorrow. Good luck.
That's you on Wednesday, as usual. Wednesday Night Rugby, very happy to say, in our new studios here. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent is with us. Hello.
Hello, Joe.
And you're somewhere out there. I can't really see you in the usual way, but I'll trust you're there. Fiona Hayes, hello.
I'm always here, Joe. How are you?
Lurking with intent.
That's it. Very one.
So lots to get through. We'll come to the weekend's action in just a moment, but Andy Farrell has named his 37-man squad for the November Internationals. South Africa, Fiji, Australia, namely. And we have Kieran Frawley in of the uncapped players. Jeremy Lockman in. Joe McCarthy is in. Jimmy O'Brien, who's been filling in for Hugo Keenan at fullback at Leinster, is in. Keane Prendergast in as well. They were, to be fair, all on the New Zealand tour. Calvin Nash, who was at the Emerging Ireland Tour in South Africa, wasn't in New Zealand. He gets the nod as well. So they're the 6 uncapped players in the 37-man squad. And then, Rory, we have plenty of omissions as well. I suppose that's more the headline news, the mainstays who don't quite make the cut.
Yeah, and they're not selection calls really. It's injuries. James Lowe won't make it. Ian Henderson won't make it. Andrew Conway and Keith Earls are not going to make it either. And I think the cloud hanging over this Ireland squad is that there's about 9 players in there, or 8 or 9 players who would have been in the 23 against New Zealand, who are named in the squad but are currently rated as doubts because they're currently not available for the provinces. Now some of them haven't played at all this season, including Hugo Keenan and Jamison Gibson Park, who are some of the first names on the team sheet. Some of them picked up injuries last weekend, like James Ryan, Tyke Byrne, Josh van der Fleer, to name but 3. So it's the squad is named. I mean, I presume they would have named more second rows if they were really concerned about Ryan and Byrne in particular. Kieran Treadwell, I think, is due to come back this weekend for Ulster. Ryan Baird is currently out with a concussion as well. So there's a lot of players who are in the squad, but we're just not quite sure where they are at fitness-wise going into this window. And the key areas of concern really are the back 3, which, as I said, Lowe, Conway, Earls would have all been in contention to start. Jordan Armour's also out, and the second row, where there's just doubts over a couple of those players. And Ian Henderson, is one of Ireland's first choice players when he's fit, but he just hasn't been fit for a good while. But there's still a lot of content. You focus on the lads who aren't there. When you look at the squad, there's still huge quality. It's still very competitive and a very settled squad as well. You mentioned 5 of the uncapped players have already been in this squad, and the other one was on the Emerging Ireland Tour, so they're not new to it. It's not like there's someone being plucked out of oblivion. Calvin Nash is probably the big surprise, but there's a big number of absentees in the back 3. He gets his go, and he played very well on Saturday.
Yeah, there may well be an issue with match practice and match sharpness, of course, but the word on Hugo Keenan is positive, that he will be fit to play against South Africa. And then we have Jacob Stockdale, surprise inclusion given his ankle injury. Mac Hansen is getting lots of game time. So at a glance, the back 3 crisis, for want of a better word, Fiona, looks like a crisis, but maybe come game time against South Africa, it's not going to be so bad.
Yeah, I think so. And look, you talked about quality there as well. I know Stockdale hasn't had loads of game time, but it's great to see him back in the mix. And he's a guy that's going to be chomping at the bit. And to get on that pitch for Ireland, a lot of talk about Lowe, and he'd feel that pressure having gotten that injury, and he'll know that he has to crawl his way back. But I think there's enough quality there. I know physicality is going to be a huge thing against the South Africans, but you've Balakoon as well as another guy coming into form. So whether Keenan's back, it's the full back position I'll be looking at. Will they have a look at Lowry? Are they going to go with Jimmy O'Brien? That's definitely a position. If Keenan, he's been so solid in the last few games for Ireland, I suppose, and injury free, it isn't a position that we've had to look at, because he's a guaranteed starter most games. So I would be kind of questioning who'll slot in there seamlessly. We know Stockdale maybe could do a job in there as well. So it's going to be interesting, but I think it's great. I think it's the perfect kind of time for these injuries. It might be a chance for some guys that we haven't seen enough of to know, are they ready? Are they ready to make that big step when it comes to World Cup time? And it seems like the perfect window now, Joe.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you sort of suspect if Hugo Keenan is even 85-90% fit, he has so much credit in the bank that they might go for him.
It depends on how you look at it from Andy Farrell's point of view. I mean, this South Africa game, Ireland played them in the pool at next year's World Cup. They haven't played South Africa since 2017. It's the one, they've beaten New Zealand 3 times in the last 18 months or so, but you always looked at it going, this team is kind of built to beat New Zealand. And you wonder about the power sides, like they haven't beaten France in this cycle. They had struggles against England when England were stronger at the start of the cycle, and they haven't played South Africa, and that's a big concern. That when they come up against the power of that South African pack married with their bench, that bomb squad coming on, they might struggle, and we want to see that. That's what we want to see, the full Irish side play against this team. But at the same time, a year out from the World Cup, what better time for Mike Lowry to start a game at 15 and cope with what South Africa have to offer, and find out whether he is the man, or Stockdale, because Stockdale has played fullback for Ireland in this cycle. He is big, strong, and has a cannon of a left boot. He may be more suited to coming in to replace James Lowe, but he has all the attributes you want against the South African team as well. So there should be some room for experimentation. These games, I mean, Ireland are number 1 side in the world. They may lose their ranking, but really that's of no major consequence. And I think they'll be competitive. They're not going to. I don't see this being a kind of a confidence-damaging defeat unless they get pinned into the corners and battered and their scrum collapses and all that sort of stuff. But should be room. You shouldn't be pressing Hugo Keenan into action with 0 minutes for what is ostensibly a friendly or a challenge match. It's one that Ireland want to win and want to perform in. But there's no guarantee Hugo Keenan will be there in the year when they play South Africa. So Lowry is fit, he's playing well, or Stockdale, who did play really well in the first couple of games for Ulster before picking up a fresh ankle injury, or Jimmy O'Brien, who's playing really well for Leinster in Keenan's stead and is very good in the air as well. This is a time to find out about these players as well.
I must say, until I was just listening to a conversation earlier as well, Fiona, I'd forgotten Ireland are number 1 in the world. I guess because of 4 years ago, you don't put too much stock in it, and it's no guarantee of anything. But you kind of forget Ireland are number 1 in the world, France number 2, South Africa number 3. And as Rory says, even weird that Ireland have not played South Africa since 2017. So I don't know. You throw all those ingredients in. Does that increase how important this is, or make no difference whatsoever? Who knows? But I could see Andy Farrell thinking, well, if there's one game psychologically it would be good to win in advance of the World Cup, akin to winning away in New Zealand, you sort of look at South Africa, and that's the one where you can go to a World Cup then with total confidence you can handle whatever's thrown at you.
Yeah, that's it. And I think he's going to try out his strongest squad possible for that first game. Maybe Fiji and Australia, he might mix up a few things, and you might get to see a lot of the guys coming through in that game. But I feel like that South African game will be huge. Exactly like you said, Joe, it's the confidence going into it. I don't think people like to discuss being number 1 in this country anywhere near a World Cup. We don't even want to mention it. So I had forgotten as well till you said it there. Look, it's huge. 2017, the last time we've seen them, South Africa have won a World Cup. In people's eyes, when you win a World Cup, I suppose they're the best in the world if you view it that way. So it's a chance on home soil to go out and really put it up to that South African pack. And I suppose he'll take a look at how the top or the Pro 14 teams are doing as well in the URC, how they've been playing, because we've seen that power game, and especially towards the end of last season in the big games against Leinster, we talked about how that South African power was coming through. through. So you wouldn't want to see Ireland be dominated either at set piece or around the breakdown or around that gain line carry area either. So I'm sure they will be focusing on that, and I think we will see that that South African will be the strongest Irish team you could possibly put out. Obviously, injuries and all that taken into contention.
So if James Ryan's is fit, who's with him? With Henderson out?
Tadhg Beirne.
Even against South Africa?
Well, again, it's not going to affect, because I would like to see Tadhg Beirne play at 6 against South Africa, because I think he fits there well. But do you start Kieran Treadwell there? I think this is where Henderson would have been really valuable and won't be there. Like, they really rate Joe McCarthy, and he has the physical profile to match the box, I think. But they're still not quite ready if he's they're still not quite sure if he's knocked the edges off his game, and I think he's more likely to play against the New Zealand A side on the Friday night. So I think what you'll see is Ryan and Beirne starting the second row with, that back row of probably Doris, either Van der Fleer or O'Mahony, depending on whether Van der Fleer is fit, and Jack Conan at 8. Although Ryan Baird was playing really well at 6 for Leinster and looked like he had. I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. A rare opportunity to interview an current Ireland international one-on-one in person, and like, he is incredibly driven this season to kind of become a kind of Courtney Laws figure, and it looked like it was kind of manifesting itself into his game until he got a horrible head injury against the Sharks. But he's been named in the squad. He may play again before the window. He's another option to come in on that six slot. So they have options. I think they would like to have someone of that athletic profile at 6, and maybe what you do is and they've listed Ryan Baird as a back row, so there's maybe scope to do that, but it's hard to argue against the players who started against New Zealand and backing them. I know we want to match up against South Africa. At the same time, what Ireland's strength have gotten them so far, their attacking game plan, Burns handling the fact that he was the one who basically won them the game in the third test in New Zealand. Yeah, it's hard to argue against starting that pack again, which they're all fit and available. It's a pity Ronan Keller isn't back as well. That's a real shame, because I think he's built to play against South Africa.
And with that, sorry Joe, is with that as well, we're talking about Tadhg Beirne, I suppose, there when he's in the second row. I think he gets far more turnovers when he's at 6, because obviously he's out on the defensive scrum and he's getting in and he's monitoring that over the ball. So even at that turnover time, he's come up with huge ones when he's playing in back row, and I think you'll have to take that into account going into those big games as well.
Yeah, great point.
And he's struggling. He's got a calf problem after the weekend, so he's another one there's a doubt over.
Why are there so many injuries?
I think there's just tough games. I think that there's been a series of big games early in the season. It's probably the extra competitiveness of the URC manifesting itself, and a bit of luck and a bit of bad timing.
Yeah, a few pre-season ones thrown in.
I think some of those lads were sent for surgeries on injuries that they wanted to clear up before the World Cup. So this was, I think Hugo Keane and James Lowe, they were all scheduled for after New Zealand, and it was kind of a risk that they might miss these games. But really, in the bigger picture, having them guys right for next year. Gibson Park's an unlucky one. He was ill and he picked up an injury. He was supposed to play and he hasn't played yet. And the rest of them are just kind of wear and tear over the course of a couple of tough games, and we're going to have more. It's Leinster Munster on Saturday night. There's going to be people coming out of there on in a bad way as well. So it's just the nature of the beast.
Sure. And the last one, are South Africa coming very much locked and loaded, fully strengthened, ready to go?
Yeah, they're hosting a camp with all of their kind of South African based players at the moment. Rosie Rasmus was speaking yesterday. He seems to be centrally involved again. He's going to be overseeing their A side who are playing in Thoma or in Port Coquille the second week. They're bringing a big squad. And they just have such depth. There's players starring in the URC who can't get near their squad, who they won't be Springboks for another 2 years, because they have such an array of incredible talent. So yeah, you'll see all of their big names, and we haven't seen a lot of them in the URC yet, because the Boks basically all played in the Rugby Championship and they've been given a bit of time off. The Sharks will have a lot of them against Ulster this weekend, but a lot of them have been put on ice, and they'll come back into it for this tour. So this, that 2017 game was a mismatch. It was when Alistair Coetzee was still in charge. They weren't the force that they are now. We haven't played against the proper Springboks for a long time. We saw a bit of it with the Lions, and they caused Tadhg Furlong struggled at times in those tests as well. So this is an incredible road test. I think this is the ultimate. It's a pivotal moment in the World Cup cycle, because it's the one team that I think these could be Ireland's kryptonite. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that's very much on the horizon. In the immediate term, we have Leinster-Munster Saturday 5:15 at the Aviva. Ulster staying on in South Africa, they play the Sharks. That's also 5:15 on Saturday, and Connacht on Friday night will host the Scarlets. So Leinster-Munster 5:15. This rivalry, Fiona, we've had 11 matches in 4 years. Because of COVID, there were more games maybe than usual. 11 matches in 4 years. We have had 2 Munster wins across those 11 matches. Munster 1 win in their last 9 against Leinster, or 3 in 15. Basically, whichever way you want to cut it up, it's not good. So I don't know. How alive is this rivalry really at the moment, Fiona?
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point, Joe. You know, I've been at those classes and at those couple of victories as well. And I think with this Munster squad, you know, we've been giving them, I suppose, a bit of stick over the last few weeks. But they came out with a very good performance last weekend. I won't say excellent, but a very good performance. And they're obviously know they're going to have to build on that. The Aviva is definitely not a nice place for them to go when playing against Leinster. It doesn't seem to suit them at all. But look, I still firmly believe that these inter-pro matches, no matter who they're playing, are just absolutely, you know, great battles, and the players want to go out. You know, when you played with Munster, or if you're playing Leinster, is the team you want to beat, and they're definitely, you know, the last few years, the pinnacle team in all groups. Even in Europe, you're looking at them and they've been really exciting to watch. So I think we will see a much better performance by Munster again, and a right hardy battle. I know I watched Connacht last week against Leinster, and obviously I thought they dominated in some areas of the game. There probably will be a lot of changes into the Leinster team, but I think it will still be the battle that we'll all be expecting.
Yeah, so certainly very live from Munster. Like, it's almost the touchstone against which they judge themselves, Rory. But for Leinster, I mean, it's hard to imagine that this.
I actually see it the other way, Joe. If you look at those results, it brings out the best in Leinster every time. You think about that Pro 12 or Pro 14 final. I just start calling it DRC consistently, even whatever year it was, because they're confused. The one in lockdown when Munster showed up at the RDS, and Leinster physically wiped them out. The only Munster player who really showed up that day was Gavin Coombs. Leinster retain, I think possibly because Johnny Sexton and Leo Cullen draw the memory of what they went through in the 2000s and still apply it in Munster week. This rivalry still means something to them in a way that they've channeled into a really positive thing, because when they show up against Munster, even when they were missing all of their players in the Aviva Stadium last year, they produce, and it still means a lot to their fans. 40,000 people going to the game on Saturday, and I would say the vast majority will be Leinster fans, because Munster fans in the last couple of years have travelled in less numbers to Dublin, probably on the back of a number of things, cost being one of them, but also the fact that they keep losing there. It's not a happy hunting ground for them, and they've kind of lost a bit of hope around this fixture. And Leinster tend to deliver very good performances when they play Munster, and they really hate losing to them. And I think now they're becoming almost like, it's not quite the All Blacks against Ireland and that kind of fear of being the team that loses to Munster, but you've got a record there that you want to protect. They'll bring back Sexton this week. They'll have the majority of the Ireland starting team in their team, apart from the lads who are injured, and they will deliver performances that they think will get them into the Ireland team in 2 weeks' time against South Africa.
So it's still
that's what drives them.
Payback for the 2000s is what you're saying?
No, it's also a standards thing, and I think it's the fact that the rivalry exists for them. And what I think is they've done is they've gotten so on top of Munster and into a generation of Munster players' heads that often Munster come up the road beaten before they get here. And what Roundtree, Prendergast, Leamy and Kiriakou have to do is make those players who have been beaten down by this rivalry believe again, and also infuse the young players with something fresh. And you see it with Coombs. I'd say if you put Shane Daly, if you put Jack Crowley out there on Saturday, they don't have that baggage, and that's where the belief might come from. It looked like on Saturday that those players believe that they can beat anyone. They looked really confident. Well, it's the players who've been around.
Yes, I get all that. I wasn't suggesting that the rivalry is dead for the players. Of course it's not, and every game's important. But for instance, if you're the more casual voter, there was a time when this rivalry was very alive and it was essential viewing. Whereas now I would put it to you, Chelsea play Manchester United Saturday 5:30.
Yeah.
So there will be a quotient who'll say, well, do I really need to tune in to see Leinster beat Munster again by 10 to 15 points pretty comfortably at the Aviva Stadium? And unfortunately, Fiona, I mean, that might insult a whole bunch of Munster fans or Munster players, but I think that would be a fairly widely held viewpoint ahead of this game, which is a pity for what was almost once upon a time absolutely essential viewing, regardless of whether you're a rugby fan or not.
Yeah, and you're looking, and you know what? I suppose you're looking at that Ulster Sharks game as well, Joe, and that's kicking off at the same time. And I didn't know kickoff times till the other day, and that's a game I've been chomping at the bit to have a look at, because I know that they'll be fully loaded. The Sharks, they'll be bringing their guys back. So, like, I'm a huge Munster fan. Hopefully they can stick in the game, you know, and I think those neutral fans might not be back in this Munster team, but I think obviously you're talking about the soccer there. That's fine. Down this way, you know, you have your two separate fans, the rugby fans. Sure. There's a lot of arguments that go on in the pub over Man United, Liverpool, etc. But and the rugby. But look, I think it's for the guys out there. They need to win this, and I think Rory had it spot on there. I think there's a lack of belief. There's a lack of belief in the fans at times, but I think they could overturn this by going up and having an absolutely huge performance. I've looked at the headlines in the last few days, and it actually kind of worried me, because there's all these headlines about Munster, these so many injuries, you know, that it might affect Munster, and these guys, they're going to wait till last minute to check on the likes of Casey and Byrne. But you know, back in the day, I suppose it didn't matter who was injured. Guys were going out there, they wanted to play and they wanted to perform in these big derbies, and I hope it's the exact same thing. I hope it's not a case of, if both these guys can't play, that Munster are already in their heads, they think they're going to lose. But I do believe the squad look a little bit more confident after last week, and guys stepped up to the plate. So there are guys there to put their hand up. Obviously Casey was huge, and the speed he gives is so exciting to watch. So I'm hoping he'll definitely be there and he can speed up that game.
I guess, Rory, it's not essential that Munster win. It's just that it's a performance and it's a contest. Otherwise, it's a real morale killer.
Yeah, and they could do picking up a point or two, even if they do lose, because as we've discussed in here a couple of times now, that they're in a bit of a race for Europe, and the 5 points they got against the Bulls last weekend was pretty key. But I mean, this is supposed to be a derby match where, you know, the cliche goes, form goes out the window, and in reality, it's two teams going out there for 80 minutes. Like, why should Munster come up the road thinking they're beaten before they get there? I know Leinster
two wins in 11 is why.
Sure, but this is a new team, a new coaching ticket. Look, I mean, the bookies will tell us. I think that I won't quote them, but the odds on Munster winning are quite long from what I checked earlier in the day. I've forgotten what they were.
What's a good, and this is like an awful question Fiona's be asking. What's a good margin of defeat for Munster here with a good performance? Losing bonus point? Is that kind of...
Losing bonus points, I think any team in the URC, if they're playing Leinster away, picking up one losing bonus point or scoring four tries is not a bad return when you look at your kind of gaming it out over the course of the season. But really, you've got to be going up the road looking to win this game and thinking that Leinster are not indestructible, because, like, you know, the Bulls have beaten them. Munster just beat the Bulls last weekend. I know you can't draw that line particularly. La Rochelle have done it. I know La Rochelle have superstars. These lads play and train with these other, you know, so the Munster players train and play with the Leinster players in Ireland camp all the time. They know they're human. Yeah, they're good players themselves, so they got to come up with some level of belief. They can't think that way, but yeah, sure. When you you probably budget for 1 point, but you come up hoping to get 4. You know, Leinster have shown vulnerability this season. Like the Zebra squad.
OTB AM with Gillette in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.